Good morning, everyone. Today is the third day of the Disaster Management Conference, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome you all to join us. The third day is often the extended day. In our mind, one day is the beginning, second day is the natural progression, and third day is when we feel that, oh, it's still today. And I'm glad that all of us are coming with such bright smiles and welcoming the day and hoping for amazing discussions that are going to come later in the day. Today, we are having two very important sessions. One, the session which will talk about how disaster management aligned to the broad idea of development itself. In the last few years, the whole idea of sustainable development goals came in, which did not limit development to the debate around what it means and what is not, to giving it practical parameters to judge its efficacy as well as its progress. It defined a goal in mind to what we are set out to achieve. And disaster management broadly got associated with a few SDG goals itself. In this session, we will talk about how to align SDG or the Sustainable Development Goals to support localized solutions for disaster management. We are having an eminent panel of speakers, both offline and online. I'll request the tech team to bring the online speakers to the screen as well.
Okay, okay.
We are having an eminent chair of the session as Major General Ajay said. I'd request Shyamji to please welcome him. Major General Ajay Seth was commissioned in Garhwal Rifles Regiment of Indian Army in 1982. He served in the Operation Blue Star and was posted in Srinagar in 1990 when insurgency started in Jammu and Kashmir. He has commanded 15 Garhwal Rifles across various geographies, including Poonch Rajouri area, and has commanded it again and again during various counter-insurgency operations in 2010, 11, 15, and has served across the borders of Pakistan and China. He was, as Major General, after commanding division, he was posted in the Army headquarters as the Additional Director General for International Cooperation to steer defense cooperation with the armed forces to foreign countries. He is a Master's in English Literature and MSc in Defense Studies, a postgraduate diploma in Human Rights Law and Alternate Dispute, and has received numerous medals and awards for his service to the nation. He was awarded the Northern Army Commendation Card, CISC Commendation Card, CNC SFC Commendation Card, and the prominent Vishish Sewa Medal by the President of India in 2013. It's a pleasure for us to welcome you, sir, to the conference. We also have with us Milind Vaidyaji, and I request Abhishek ji to please welcome him. Milind Vaidyaji is the chairman for Center for Disaster Management and Studies and has served in the Merchant Navy for more than 2 decades. He has worked in disaster affected areas in Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Latur, Bhuj, Mumbai floods, Mandar Devi stampede, and has vast experience in management of post-disaster situations, especially in relief camp management. He has also the visiting faculty of National Institute of Disaster Management, State Disaster Management Cell in Pune, Mumbai University. It's a pleasure to welcome you, sir, to the conference. We have Dr. Rupam Shukla joining us online. Dr. Rupam ji was with us in the conference as well physically, and today she is joining us online to participate in this session. Dr. Rupam Shukla ji is a postdoc at Potsdam Institute of Climate Impact Research. She has pursued her PhD in the Department of Natural Resources, Terry School of Advanced Studies. She is currently the assistant professor at IIT Roorkee and is key part of the disaster management school there. She's also a member of GeoX Young Academy as a member of the Geo Society group, and is closely associated with various climate risk management magazines and groups. Climate change management and disaster management are two key areas where she wants to make an impact. And we hope that we learn a lot from you from this session. Looking forward to listening to you, ma'am. We have one of the key stakeholders of this conference joining us online in the name of Dr. Satish Modh. Dr. Satish Modh ji, I have known him for past 10 years, and he has been a mentor figure for me. Having served in Air India, having worked in the field of disaster management since 2001 after the Gujarat earthquake, he has written 8+ books in disaster management and is currently the director for Vivekananda Education Society Institute of Management. As a management consultant, he works on the field of strategy and human resource management and has been a leading voice in the way organizations function more effectively and more prominently. For us at Sewa International, our disaster management work has been guided by Satish sir since the beginning, and we look forward to an active participation from you, sir, and learning from you. Thank you. We also have Dr. Disha Shah with us in the panel. I request Rakesh ji to please welcome her. Dr. Disha Shah is an associate professor of VESIM, Mumbai, and has experience of more than 14 years with rich corporate experience across industries. Financial markets and risk management remain an area of expertise for Dr. Disha, and Dr. Disha was instrumental in helping Sewa International document the efforts that we did in COVID-19 in the form of both helping us identify what are the areas of intervention in which we succeeded and identifying the gaps that will help us improve in the future. It's a pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Disha, to the conference. We also have with us Dr. Jyoti. Dr. Jyoti ji is a professor and associate dean of academics at VESIM, and she is a postgraduate, as she is a PhD from SVNIT with a co-guide from IIM Ahmedabad. As a teaching enthusiast, she has published more than 30 research papers across various disciplines. Human resource management remains a key area of her expertise, and she was also instrumental in helping us frame the right frameworks or document the right frameworks for our work during disaster management. It's a pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Jyoti, and I would request Abhishek ji to please welcome Dr. Jyoti with a token of gratitude from our side. Pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Jyoti. Now I would request the Honorable Chair to continue the session proceedings. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am privileged to be chairing the last session of this conference on disaster management. The theme of this session being, how can aligning sustainable development goals support localized solutions for disaster management? My responsibility becomes more important because I have very eminent panel of experts with me. Ladies and gentlemen, disasters are increasingly impacting people's well-being and their livelihoods, which means that these disasters hinder sustainable development. Disaster risk reduction measures therefore need to be a central part of the sustainable development. The Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, as they are also known as global goals, were adopted by the United Nations member states in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, to protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity by 2030. It is a transformative plan of action for all countries to implement. It integrates social, economic, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. First 6 goals are social goals. 7 to 12 are economic goals, and 13 to 15 are environment. The remaining are means of implementation of these goals. The 17 SDGs are intertwined, meaning that the action in one field will impact the outcomes in others. None of them is in standalone mode. Countries have pledged to leave no one behind and have committed to fast-track progress for those who are most backward and deprived. That is why the SDGs are designed to bring the world to several life-changing zeros, including zero poverty, zero hunger, zero AIDS, zero discrimination against women and girls. Localization of SDGs is crucial to any strategy aimed at achieving the goals under the 2030 agenda. This involves the process of adapting, planning, implementing, and monitoring the SDGs from national to local levels by relevant institutions and stakeholders. The key outcomes of the SDGs localization efforts include state and district indicator frameworks and review mechanisms for monitoring progress. Now, without much ado, I hand you over to our first speaker. I will request the honorable speakers to adhere to the time limit. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Honorable panel members, and to all my young friends, especially I'm very happy to see so many young people getting involved in the topic of disaster management, which has been very rare nowadays. So anyway, thank you very much for the all the concerned people who have given me this opportunity to share my views related to disaster management. Since 2004, rather since Bhuj earthquake, I am working in this field. And before that, I was working in the merchant navy. So maybe I have faced more disasters in my tenure as a merchant navy officer. But that really helped me in changing my entire focus and maybe working in this field. So I just penned on few points on that. Especially it is related to my experiences and what last 15 years, 20 years I am working in this field. So I'll start with that basically. The disaster management, when it talks about that any hazard converting into disaster, what are the measures we take in prevention as well as mitigation. And these are the disaster management scopes we work. But I always feel that if you work 70-80% in pre-disaster scenario and only the 20% in the, there will be only very less chances to work into the post-disaster. As in the army, it is always said that more you sweat in the peace, less you bleed in the war. So this is exactly what there should be into the disaster management field. Unfortunately, in all the government sectors, it is not the case. They have all more onto the response. And whenever I traveled abroad and all other places, they always say that Indians are the best in the response, but very poor into the pre-disaster phase. Take an example, any example, whether you tsunami, whether it is Mumbai terrorist attack, Mumbai floods, anything. Within 2 to 3 days, we come back to the normal. But the same situation, if it is in some cyclone situation in United States, it takes them the weeks, maybe 15 days to come back to their normal stage. So we are the best responders, no doubt about that. But just because being a good responders, that is putting us into the more damage conditions. The damages are very high. If we work into the pre-disaster scenario, and that's the reason why government should focus their entire, maybe the paradigm shift in their thinking capacity, that how they can work into the pre-disaster scenario and less into the post-disaster. so that if you are prepared, that is the definition of the any hazard. I mean, definition of disaster. That if your capacity is properly built, then the chances of any hazard converting into the disaster becomes very less. So that is the idea which we have been not following. Unfortunately, I am saying this. I'll give you the example of from where I come, that is in state of Maharashtra. Our disaster management cell comes under the relief and rehabilitation. That means that has nothing, only when something happens, then only we respond, because that is where your relief and rehabilitation starts. There should be an exact department, separate department from the government section, where we can continuously monitor the situation, and then 80%, 70% should be involved into the pre-disaster phase. So that is the reason why maybe we will have to change the outlook of the government, right from the government, and then as well as the following things we can work. So we have to prepare onto the pre-disaster. Then secondly, the in pre-disaster phase, very important component is the preparation of the plans onto the various level, whether it is a school plan, is a district plan, state plan, and then that involves into the your response plan also. But once you map everything, then you understand exactly what are the chances of any hazard converting into disaster, into that certain area, locality, the extent of vulnerability, and then how that vulnerability can be reduced. So that all things we can do if you have got a proper document in your hand. Unfortunately, again, NDMA, the guidelines issued by the NDMA, very few states and very few districts are following that. There are about 12 chapters in that. Most of you also must have gone through that. And none of them have actually properly documented those plans. So I think we will have to push onto that line also. That will be the very key issue. If you have got a proper document, that builds up your confidence also, that how we can respond to the certain area, how we can do the damage assessment, as well as there is some new concept which is coming as a pre-disaster damage assessment. Means if you are considering an earthquake in certain areas, who are the vulnerable groups, what are the vulnerable properties, and what will be the extent of financial damage, which leads you to the insurance sector. So I think the India is one of the few countries where the insurance for the vehicle is mandatory, but for the human being it is not mandatory. So in that case, we can bring up this point also under the government level, and if we can get it done, then I think there will be a lot of burden in a post-disaster scenario. What are the burden onto the government, financial burden, that also can be reduced. But this third important point is about the capacity building. We are very short of capacity building. Maybe it is a mindset of the people कि चलता है, होने के बाद देख लेंगे. We will have to change that mindset of the people, and that can come through the very serious level of the very seriously taken up the project of capacity building, right from the grassroots level to the bureaucrats level and up to the ministry level. Once that has been done, I think climbing up the ladder of a pre-disaster scenario won't be very hard. Whatever my experiences that have shown that in various villages, when we have worked into the pre-disaster scenario, conducted trainings onto the various sectors, how to identify the hazard, what are the chances of hazard converting into the disaster, there those people have understood that, they have formed their own teams for the response. Like for simple example, I'll give you in that whenever any situation like a cyclone situation occurs, those villages, they were very reluctant to shift during at the cyclone, in the condition of cyclone. But after the training, they have understood that if they can mobilize the shifting of the people, of the seniors, the children, or maybe the ladies, after the first or second warning of the cyclone, then it becomes easier to work into the post-cyclone situation. There you need a limited resources also. So that comes into their plan also. So village level plan, tahsil level plan, district level plan, and your state level plan. Unfortunately, all the states, they make a state level plan, they make a national level plan, but they don't go to the grassroots level. And I think that is the main problem when we are still onto the same place with what we were onto the 10 years back, because the people have not understood the importance of their response. So there the limit onto the government agencies. If we have that proper capacity building, we can limit the involvement of the government, like NDR, National Disaster Response Force. It takes maybe 2 days or 3 days sometimes, if any cyclone or the earthquake situation. But if the capacity is properly built at the village level and tehsil level, their involvement can be reduced to the considerable level. If we provide them the suitable equipments, then also they will be able to respond to that certain situation. Maybe the certain equipments which are easily available locally, and the maintenance of that, then that can be achieved before the NDRF or the state disaster response force or the other agencies reach there. Lot of things can be handled. Then it is the another important thing we are talking about is the climate change. Because of the climate change, the ecological whatever the components in that, that has become a major concern at the government level, because of this climate change. The frequency of the disasters, natural disasters, is changing. The intensity is also changing, and the area covered by that particular disaster is also changing very fast, and that is putting a lot of pressure onto the agencies. If we can really work, this is the climate change is a thing what we cannot avoid. We have to accept it as it is, as it comes. But then the certain regulations like coastal regulatory zone and cyclone shelters or the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project, which is currently in all the coastal areas, if we can really take it seriously, I'll give you an excellent example of that. There is a World Bank funded, I think, I don't know how many of you know about that. It's a World Bank funded project, National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project. It runs into the all coastal areas in the country, all 7,500 kilometers. So in there are the four major components. First component is to develop the roads, which is the coastal roads, so that your transportation during the cyclone and your tsunami can be fast. Second thing is the electricity. All the electrical lines, they are supposed to be underground. Third thing is the development of the mangrove development, so that the impact of the what do you say, your tsunami as well as your cyclone can be controlled. And the fourth component is the cyclone shelters. So cyclone shelters now, unfortunately, Maharashtra, there are about 12 cyclone shelters. None of them has been constructed. But in Goa and in Gujarat, all the 12 cyclone shelters which were allocated them, they have been already constructed and already into the use. The people are using it for their family functions and other things. So they are independent. That is the government agenda actually. So that those cyclone shelters should be independent. So these are the very key issues and the positive approach by the government. But only thing is, if we as a society, if we cannot take it, if our capacity is not properly built, then I think it becomes puts a lot of pressure onto the government. So then insurance sector, we really need to insist on to the insurance sector, so that whether it is a crop insurance, animal insurance, means pet insurance, or human insurance, we have to work on that. That will reduce a lot of pressure. And the last thing I would like to say is the third party audit. There are a lot of projects going on, but there is nobody to monitor that. Like all the projects, whether it is a school safety project, the National Cyclone Mitigation Project, or a DRR project, what is happening onto the district level, there is no proper documentation on that. So we need to put a pressure as the team of NGOs or with the government agencies. We have to tell them that unless you have a third party audit of that, all the things what has been happening, what are the initiatives taken by the government, are they properly implemented, and what are the changes are required to be done into that entire scenario of the disaster management cell. Because the entire funding for the disaster management, that comes from the central government to state government, and state government adds their own budget. Then it comes to the district government. So then district government has the authority to spend. So maybe a few people, they spend 5 lakhs rupees on preparation of the plan, and some pledge 5 lakhs rupees on the school safety. There is no specific guideline to that. So we have to have a proper monitoring of that. In that case, we can really work well. So third party audit is also a major concern why our disaster management system is not properly functioning. So these are my views actually, because I work into the field. Maybe the views can be different from the other people also. But thank you very much again for giving me this opportunity. And if any questions during that, we can discuss it more. Thank you very much to the panel.
Mr. Milan Vaidya spoke about that we are poor in pre-disaster response, and we have been good responders. That is very true. Means Our experience also says that our preparedness is always very poor. And now there has been a paradigm shift from pre-disaster to post-disaster preparedness. There has been a shift after this 2015, 2005, this NDMA Act came up. We also spoke of capacity building. This is one area which has been gray all along. Insurance of, as he brought out, insurance of vehicles is mandatory, but insurance of human beings and livestock is not mandatory. So insurance is a very important part of disaster management. Then documentation, this third party audit which he is talking of, if we have to align disaster management with localized solutions, we have to monitor. There are specific goals laid down, there are parameters laid down, and they are there right up to the village level. But proper monitoring has to be done. Proper audit has to be done. I think the points that he had covered were very well, and now I'll request our next speaker, Disha Shah, to kindly speak.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It's been a fantastic conference for the last 2 days, and it's going to end, I'm hoping, with a big bang again today with equally interesting thoughts from eminent speakers that I have on the panel. So we're from Vivekanand, and I will be talking on more so aligning the SDG goals that support the localized solution, and what we have seen and witnessed with Sewa International's work done in the entire process of this aligning of the SDG goals and coming up, like our MN panels just said, pre-disaster management that we are getting into and improvising the same. Just for reference, we've put in the SDG goals that we have, and Major Sir just explained us the goals that we are looking forward to 2030. Like Sir just said, 2030, sorry. The goals that were focused is divided into 3 things, and that is economy, society, biosphere. Now, when we're looking at the society is something, society and biosphere are the ones that we're focusing on at this point, and economy is something that the government comes in and puts in a lot of schemes and other processes that come in which the government is moving in hand with so many NGOs taking in responses from them, taking in their drafts, taking in their processes, and trying to make new and amendments in all the processes and schemes so that they are in tandem with the need that we have today, more towards pre-disaster management rather than post-disaster management that we have been suffering as a big problem. COVID pandemic, I don't need to refresh everyone's memory, but just for the sake of the presentation, we originally have an outbreak, and then we heard the first time there was an epidemic in all of our lives. But for the first time in most of our lives, we heard of a pandemic. A pandemic, that means there's a sustained community level transmission on 1 or 2 or more than 2 people or 2 continents. And this is something that we experienced globally for the last 1.5, 2 years, and we've been reeling in with the problems that are coming in. Hopefully it's slowed down and it won't enter into our systems anymore. The phase or the problem that we faced. No, you're not. So to just relive why and what India managed or what India faced, the first wave did not break us really bad, but the second wave pretty much broke all our infrastructure, was so overwhelmed with every capacity that we had and over and beyond, and we were overflowing with the problems. We needed so much support, help, and requirement of so many things, such as from basic things to fake information being circulated because of so much panic created internally, externally, over and above. We had infrastructure being overwhelmed and we could not support our systems. And we faced on 11th May, if everyone knows this, We are over 3,48,529 cases daily of COVID Delta wave, which was the most hazardous wave, and over 4,200 deaths happening daily in India. And that is where the COVID Sewa International came into place. We identified the pandemic. Response is what Sewa International has done, and done very well, that we can very proudly say that what we've analyzed, what we've done research on, and we've done it with them in hand, post the response that they have given through various indigenous networking and production in terms of every requirement that anyone would need during that pandemic period post, as soon as the Delta wave hit in, was maintained and managed all through essentials, medical kits, be it PPE kits, medicines, and the biggest requirement at that stage was oxygen concentrators. So we were approached and we did an international impact study assessment of Sewa's initiative in that major period of havoc and created that was there from May to June, all the way to the end of July. So we started off with a logic model that, and on the left-hand side, what you can see is the SDG goals that were aligned while we were doing the entire impact assessment and what we found as an input. So we had a logic model created for assessing the entire effort done by Sewa, including inputs from various volunteers, from ground persons, everyone from a non-professional to a professional to a doctor, everyone in that entire process. All the inputs were analyzed. All the activities that they did were focused on, assessed, worked on, verified, and then the outputs, what they were looking towards is what was how many patients were served, to what kind of patients were served, to what regions did they cover, to what kind of bandwidth that they have, and how long were they able to sustain this support. More importantly, it should not be a one week event. It should be through the entire course of the pandemic and the need of the people around. Moving on to the methodology that we did, we looked at more so secondary data, but we also interviewed a large number of people firsthand and also got a data of over 50,000 patients. The outcomes is what we were focusing on and what they wanted. We wanted to analyze what is it, did they achieve the efficacy and the efficiency that they were trying to achieve when they initially started off the entire process or entire moment. So we devised a questionnaire. What you can see is a snapshot of what we had asked from every center that Sewa was supporting. Everything from having the basic verification from the location to the contact person to the number of beds did they have. What was their requirement? What was that was fulfilled by Sewa? What is it that they did fulfilled by anybody else it was fulfilled? What are the requirements in terms of consumables, any kind of essentials that were needed, everything and anything apart from even the oxygen concentrators. All the details were taken for each of the months that we were focusing on, and we also analyzed on the number of patients that we served at the end of every month. This is something that we got further to the patients data that we have got. What you can see is individual patients served at a specific center, and this is a very small, minuscule amount of patients that you can see. And we focus on everything from what was the patient's prehistory, so any medical history, to the age of the patient, did they have any vaccination, or what was their oxygen level on admission, to what they did when they were discharged, what was the status on discharge, and what kind of effort or support was given to them over and above all the effort that they were putting in. Were their family supported, if they needed any support in terms of essentials, and so on and so forth. So this is a very fantastic image that I'm sure everybody's seen outside, that has been put up from by Sewa International on their reach during the COVID disaster. And you can see every single state that has been marked in red, that they have been there. But I would like to put out what we found out in the entire process. And this is what we have found out on the reach of Sewa's concentrator reach. And if you notice, it's over 5,000 concentrators in every single state. There has been more than 100, 200, depending on the size of the state and the need. The number of concentrators were reached very much within time for the need and have been utilized by multiple number of patients, and made sure that only the essential or the one who needed the care were taken up for and given the concentrators. So everywhere, be it whatever latitude, longitude, any distance, Sewa International was there in the whole process. What we found also in during the logistics survey is that the distance traveled eventually for all the concentrators across India was more than 4 times the diameter of Earth itself. That has been the momentous effort put in by Sewa International's lot number of volunteers that have come in place. So in terms of outreach and inclusivity, they've made sure this reached to everybody. So they've not kept any barrier, or everyone that needed any kind of help was available through their portals, e-Seva, there was available through phone calls, their karyakarta. All the people on the floor were available for everyone. So they had over 5,271 low-income individuals were serviced, 1,312 Muslims, 2018 Christians. We had over 20,000 other caste and variations. We also had major, no gender bias was seen in the entire process. The lives touched through the distribution of oxygen concentrators and everything apart from that also. So oxygen concentrators is the main focus, and what we have seen that oxygen was the main requirement, but we also saw over 60,000 patients were served. Over 78,000 families were touched, and over 2,89,000 lives were touched directly or indirectly, be it with their families. We've seen so many instances that my colleague will discuss further in the cases that we discussed. Individuals, families, multiple people from a group of or an area have been serviced and required of whatever requirement was given to them through these volunteers. We have over 5,875 concentrators were provided, and the accessories that required for it to run the entire due course of the 2 months, 2.5 months, when there was the need of or utter need of oxygen, there was nothing that caused it to stop. They made sure that any part that was required was made available before the requirement came in, and they were moving 2 steps ahead so that there was all kinds of prevention of any kind of stoppage in the services that they wanted to give. This is something that we wanted to put in very proudly to put out to you, the kind of effort that all the volunteers at Sewa International put together, with just 60 Sewa volunteers that were registered with them, but with over 3,400 non-Sewa volunteers. The other day we heard one of the speakers talking about one of the students wanting to come and volunteer on the ground without being part of Sewa International. That is the faith that everyone has with this group and wanted to come and volunteer in all ages and types. We'll also be able to see a lot of varied age groups in the case study further to see what age group wanted to come in and volunteer. There was no specific requirement, no specific format. Anyone and everyone could volunteer. We had over 10 lakh hours of put in together, and just 60 days is what we have just tracked. Just 60 days, that is the number of hours that you have put together. Further, we're looking, like I was talking about the case studies. I would like my colleague, Dr. Jyoti Chandwani, to take it forward.
Thank you so much. Good morning, one and all. In continuation with the impact study we had done with Sewa International, I'll start with taking this opportunity to thank our director, Dr. Satish Mode, to introduce us for the first time what is Sewa International. Right? Yeah, so it was during the pandemic we got introduced as a faculty what Sewa International is and what they are doing. And like we were fortunate to do the impact study of Sewa International. And since 2 days hearing so much from all the panelists and the amazing work they are doing, I feel really, really motivated. And I think tomorrow the first thing when I go to when I reach my college, to ask the process of joining Sewa International. Talking about the interviews, as my colleague said, we had interviewed more than hundreds of people, and we have categorized all the interviews into different categories. Like we categorize into humanity over religion, where like the outreach and inclusivity, like the PPT of my colleague which has shown, like there was no discrimination among the community, religion, caste, age, gender, anything. Right, so that was the first way we categorize all the case study, community over humanity over religion. And I think that is also aligned with the mission of Sewa International, which speaks about humanity in distress, local communities, and to promote volunteerism. The second category, we went to distribute about the case studies where the poverty line tribal in the challenging places. We have seen in the map where Sewa has reached, so it's not about they have reached to the where the comfort place were there. As Mr. Milind also has said, in the initial stage, the roads should be constructed. So during the time of such disaster, the reach becomes very easy. Yeah, sure. And the third important part we distributed the case study was into volunteers. So this is the data received for interview. This is the questionnaire. This set of questions we asked the center heads. We spoke to patients. We spoke to volunteers. Two of the volunteers whom we spoke are Shubhamji and Ashishji sitting over here. And throughout the project, they really help us with all the data, with all the information also. Talking about humanity over religion, so we can see a case study. We had number of case study, but looking at the time constraint, we have just come to few case study only. So Nabisa was there, a 74-year-old lady from Kerala. Like she was in a desperate need of oxygen concentrator. We saw in the second wave the shortage of oxygen concentrator, and she was fortunate enough to get the oxygen concentrator in due time from Sewa International. And when we spoke to her about whether she knows what is Sewa International, she was not aware of what Sewa International is, but she was very thankful and like she really appreciated the work they are doing. The second case study is it's the transgender. We know like how this sector of society we discriminate with them. So even they were not left with the discrimination. Like in COVID pandemic, anyone doesn't discriminate any caste, gender. So they were equally affected. And they also faced that crunch of getting oxygen concentrator. And it was Sewa International who came forward and held them. And even we spoke to them, even they were not aware of what Sewa International is, but they were really happy and they appreciated and wished Sewa International a good journey. I think some technical issues, I'll continue. The second category we moved was patients below poverty line, the tribal, the challenging places. So we can see number of cases where, like Mr. Bojat Gogai, a 48-year-old government employee from Assam was affected. Mr. Kumaram, a 40-year-old resident from Kerala, a daily wage worker was affected. Mr. Manoj Kumar, a 29-year-old worker as a helper, he was coming from an affluent family in Indore, but still the family never helped him with any oxygen concentrator or any the first aid needed for the COVID. So it was Sewa International who came forward and helped him also. Then we could also see a case of Leeladhar, 26-year-old, a security guard in Maharashtra, and also Satyajit, a 46-year-old person from Nagaland. So people from different sectors, different areas, different religion, different community were impacted due to the support and help of oxygen concentrator provided by Sewa International during the second phase of COVID. Talking about the volunteers, as I already spoke, two of the volunteers who are doing amazing work is Mr. Shubhamji and Ashishji sitting with us over here. And beside that, we also spoke like age is not a number. So there were people like who came forward to volunteer and help during the second phase. So we could see an example of Mr. Gundar Rao, right, from Hubli, Karnataka. He is a 75-year-old guy. And like he didn't have money to get the oxygen concentrator. So by the time he was introduced to Sewa International and he could get the help of Sewa International, he sold off his jewelry to get oxygen concentrator for his wife. And this motivated him. Sure. I'll hold it. And this motivated him to do the selfless work what Sewa was doing, and like even he sold his further savings and jewelry to get more oxygen concentrator. And after that, he got introduced to Sewa International, and he joined Sewa International to do the volunteer work. So we have different examples also, like, where we saw the first days, some students were ready to come forward. In the similar manner, we also came across volunteers who took the initiativeness, and without being a part of Seva organization, they wanted to contribute to the society. And like they did an amazing work with that. These are the few snapshots of whatever the cases like I just spoke about, and more cases we interviewed. So few pictures from that. Covered from all the states of our country. Milinji also spoke about preparedness of disaster management. Coming to that important part, in that Sewa International, and like they also working for the rehabilitation planning into public health infrastructure, frontline community health workers, capacity building, which sir also spoke about, and sustainable livelihood. This much from our side. Thank you.
Disha Shah and Jyoti Chanwani primarily spoke about the COVID. As they said, COVID is a pandemic. And just to remember, pandemic starts with P. So P has a passport. Passport also starts with P. It started from China, traveled to India, and covered all 192 countries. Our efforts, India's efforts, were appreciated internationally. And what Milinji said in his first part, that we are good responders. Even during the second wave, we were not prepared all that much. And India suffered a lot of casualties. Each one of us amongst us who are present here, they must have lost some of their acquaintances or relatives. Each one of us got affected. It is because we responded. We did not take preventive measures for that. However, the work put in by Sewa International needs applause from all of us. As covered by them, that the oxygen concentrators, 5,000 oxygen concentrators were distributed amongst all the states, and the distance that was covered was 4 times the diameter of Earth. The outreach and inclusivity also of Sewa volunteers was creditable. A lot of research has been done by the 2 speakers, and we must congratulate Sewa International for the creditable work that has been put in. Jyoti Chanwani also covered the case studies. She had collected a lot of data pertaining to reach and volunteers. And what one aspect of a presentation which touched me was that humanity over religion. We in armed forces make no discrimination of caste, creed. After all, caste, creed, religion. After all, we don't have a choice. We have been made like this as a male, female, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai. That is all creation of God. We have got nothing to do with that. So this aspect of Sewa International, that there was no discrimination, is another creditable and applaudable part. I just want to give a warning that this COVID, Corona may come again. We have seen number of cases that have come up in China, and it may affect us. So though all restrictions have been taken off by Ministry of Home Affairs since the month, since end of March, but we must adhere to COVID protocol behavior. Those three issues which are there, we must keep in mind and always be sensitive and prepared about this pandemic. Another aspect which I observed during this COVID pandemic was waste management. This is one area which is great to us and it needs to be paid attention. And I'm sure Sewa International must have done a lot of work towards this also. Now I'll request our third speaker who's online.
Hi, am I audible? Okay, so thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Rupam, you're not audible. We're trying again. Give us a minute.
Does it work better now?
I
Hi.
can see you on the screen, ma'am, but you're not audible. Give us a minute.
I guess, does it work now?
Dr. Rupam, would you try once again?
Yeah, does it work now? Hi, am I audible? Should, hello?
Yes, Dr. Rupam. You're audible now.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you. So I'll try to share my screen now. Okay. Yeah, sorry for the technical issues from my side. Is it also possible to share the presentation at your end? Because I see that there's some problem that is happening.
Ma'am, I don't think we have the presentation over here with us.
I
Ma'am,
shared.
we seem to not have the presentation over here with us. We are just checking on the files downloading. Give us a minute.
Yeah. Me. Okay. Does it work now? Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Great. So I'll put it on slideshow and I hope it works. you. Okay, thank you, the respected chair and all my fellow panelists. It's and also thank you, Sewa International, for giving me this opportunity to express my views and my thoughts on this topic for thematic session 6, which is aligning sustainable development goals for localizing or for supporting localized disaster management solutions. So when I was given this topic, I'm a researcher. Like a brief introduction was given about myself. I always tend to, dissect the topic that is at hand, and I try to break down the thematic session, the title of it, and what I understood was that we want to engage in a discussion on supporting localized solutions for disaster management response. That is the broader aim of the conversation that we'll have here, and we are already having here. And what the session also wants to do is align how we can do this by the global goals of sustainable developments that we have. A lot has been, and yeah, I would like to also congratulate Sewa International, the organization team, for coming up with this much essential topic of how we translate these global goals, which are discussed and also in many ways formulated at global level, and how they translate or how they needs to be implemented within the local context and the diverse geography of India. So yeah, then a lot has been said about what these global SDGs are. So I'll briefly and quickly sum it up for, I'm sure most of us know about it, but for some who don't. So there are 17 global goals that were formulated with an envision to for the agenda of 2030, and they broadly aim at having an sustainable economic growth and inclusive economic growth, supporting and taking care of the environment, and also making sure that the social benefits are well covered. Aligned to this, there are these 17 goals that are formulated. One second, sorry. Yeah, and one can map them in these three broad categories of environment, economy, and society. Not to say that they don't interlink, they highly interact and interlink as well. But yeah, broadly, one could summarize them like this. So my understanding of SDGs, the agenda for 2030, which came as a, which took forward the Millennium Development Goals in 2015, taking
Technological hiccups are always there. I'll request the audience, if anyone has got any question to what our speakers have already spoken, we can have a discussion on that.
Dr. Satish and Dr. Rupam, both of them have lost the connection. We have the attendees with us, so it's a connection problem at their end. But yes.
Knowing Shubham ji, I'm sure he'll get them back. He's not going to leave them like that. Meantime, we can utilize our time in
Yeah.
question answer session.
I have a question for Milind ji. हमने सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल्स की बात की है और भारत में डिजास्टर्स अलग अलग क्षेत्र में अलग अलग प्रकार के हैं. सो हर क्षेत्र की आवश्यकताएं अलग है एंड द नेचर ऑफ इंटरवेंशन हैज टू बी इन अकॉर्डेंस. फिर अलग अलग प्रकार के स्टेक होल्डर्स है. यू हैव सिविल सोसाइटी, यू हैव रिस्पॉन्स टीम्स, यू हैव पॉलिसी मेकर्स एंड द फ्रेमवर्क इज देयर. while we talk in terms of presentations या जब हम ऐसे conference में चीजों को formulate करते हैं, we tend to overlook some of the coordination or end time implementation issues. यहाँ पे हमारे team members हैं, विजय जी या मनवर जी बैठे होंगे, who were on the ground while responding to the current glacial burst last year in Uttarakhand. As a practitioner or someone who is capitalizing or mobilizing the social capital, उस पहले 72 hours या 42 hours का जो critical समय है, how can we respond to that while not losing track to what we discuss in terms of sustainable development goals? How to balance the two?
Okay, thank you for the question. The sustainable development, and of course, what the question I believe was related to the post-disaster scenario. Actually, the disaster has already occurred, and now we have got a very little chance to prevent extension of that or mitigate that. So we have to literally wait in that case that how we can reduce or control the situation. That one thing comes into the very essential part of that. And when the ground field, people working on the ground, there is one system called as a which is an incident response system. So incident response system that really can help you into this. Unfortunately, in our frame of our bureaucratic level, this system is becoming very difficult to operate. But when we are working as a NGO, or when we are working on the field and managing the resources, then we can really do a lot of, it can really make a lot of difference when we are responding to a certain situation. This situation can develop into we can take it as an opportunity and make it converted into the development. For one example I'll give you into that is, this recently what project which has been done by the central government and World Bank, that is about the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project. And in that, it is not only the construction of the cyclone shelter, it is not only construction of the mangrove development, it is not only the construction of the roads, but then it is helping into the development also. Like once the roads are properly constructed, obviously the connectivity also goes up. Obviously, there are more industries can come up. One small example I'll give you. When in the say about 2 years back, 2-3 years back in Maharashtra, there were a lot of crisis, drought-related crisis, and the government asked all the people to take out the sludge or the soil from the dams, and again you can use it into their fields. So when I look into the terms of development from the disaster, so disaster is of course a drought situation. And the remedy on that is to take out that all the sludge or whatever the soil from the dam area, so that next year lot more water can be stored. But I look at it into the different level. That soil which has been extracted from the dams, that goes to the farmers. Then farmers can cultivate more food, more crops. Their profit grows up. That grows up. With that profit, he can buy a fridge, he can buy a television, he can buy a new tractor. So that is directly connected to the industrial development. So more jobs are also connected there. So there is always an opportunity in every disaster. So that disaster is always linked. You can always link it to the development phase. Like for COVID also now in 2 years, we have literally shaken up. There are lot many businesses. I mean, whatever the figures we gather, we had a dashboard in Pune, and we are collecting a lot of figures for Pune district as well as Pune city also. And in that, almost 30% restaurants closed down. Not many private businesses closed down. But then when the things are started opening up, the people are coming with the new ideas, and that is really helping. That of course central government and state government is putting a lot of money also into that. But Kaushalya Vikas schemes are also implemented in a good speed and with the good intentions. So there are new things other than just running to the hotel. There are a lot of other ideas are coming up. The new generation is coming with the new ideas, and then with the little of funding and little of the investment, they have started developing themselves. It need not be the immediately we will see the effects, but maybe after 2-3 years we can we can see it really into the phase of development. So for the field again, incident response system is good for us. We can always utilize that in a very proper way, but we must learn to see every disaster as an opportunity. Once we start converting that into opportunity, then maybe we will learn. When we see the disaster management cycle, first everything has happened, and then we have learned our lessons. So prevention part, then mitigation part, and again the preparedness, that has to come as a flow of the cycle. So I think that will help us into the development section.
Dhanyavad. Thank you. Before we connect to Dr. Rupam Shukla, I'll just add on to what Milanji has said. Change is the law of nature. Some say development leads to disasters. Others say disaster leads to development. So it has both positive and negative aspects. And we must always look into the opportunity that a disaster provides us. Second part that what has been repeatedly highlighted during our discussion is capacity building. I'll just give an example. After pandemic, this COVID pandemic second wave, I had gone to a government office and there were two gentlemen who were talking amongst them, and they said, means I'm giving an example that how we become good responders. They said each one of them was talking and telling that they have got an oxygen cylinder with them in their vehicle. Now, naturally, if you respond in this manner, there will be shortage of oxygen concentrators, because as a preventive measure, people were stocking it in their vehicle or at their home. Now we'll connect it to Dr. Rupam Shukla.
Yes, we have Dr. Rupam on the phone with us. There is some internet issues at her end. We have put her slides back on the screen and she's joining us over a call. Dr. Rupam, you can continue.
Okay, so it's the slide 4 on
yes.
Line, sorry.
Yeah,
okay,
slide 4, thematic session 6, slide 4. We will just putting it up.
Okay, great. Apologies again from my end. There's some internet issue at the IT happening right now. So, yeah.
You can continue, Dr. Rupam.
Okay. Yeah. So now what I was talking about was that when we want to translate or localize the SDGs for disaster management, the other global framework, the Sendai framework, is something that also comes on, is something that we also need to talk about. So as you can see on the slide, the global Sendai framework was also on the same timeline as the SDGs, was implemented in 2015, which has one outcome with one goal and 4 priorities. And there are 7 targets that are there in the Sendai framework. So can you click on the next slide?
Sure.
Yeah. So there's you might see a timeline of how the Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction was implemented, and it's also an anticipatory framework which talks about the goals that we need to achieve by 2030. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
Okay, so now it's important to understand because we're trying to have a conversation around how to localize the SDGs and how that will enable, disaster management. Therefore, it is also important to just briefly reflect on how these two interconnect, the global goals and the Sendai framework. So, numerous studies have looked into the cross interlinkages, and on the left, what you see A, B, C to G are the global targets that are there, and then on the right are the sustainable development goals. So there is enough recognition that there is an overlap, and both have a complex and interconnected engagement. These two goals. Okay, can you go to the next slide?
Yes.
So now, moving forward, I wanted to discuss and talk to you about how we can align the SDGs to support localized action. So, how I see this is it is based on a 4-pillar. If you click next, you will see a figure with an arrow, and there are 4 blocks in it. So these are the 4 pillars that are there for localizing SDGs. What does localizing mean? Localizing, as I understand it, it means as the process of taking sub-national and local context for achieving the SDGs and also enabling disaster risk reduction. And when I say localizing, it also means that we reflect on the definitions of these SDGs, how we're implementing it, and how we're monitoring it, and making sure that the benefits of localization are just and equitable. That is how I understand this. And to do this, the first pillar is to start with interaction and learning from the locals, engaging with the local communities. As some of our fellow panelists have also said, Dr. Disha, and they've also discussed how, during the time of COVID, they interacted and they had a conversation with the locals. So this would, bring forward the problems of the communities and what they face. And based on this, taking this forward, the second point is the joint framing of the local goals. Of course, these are global goals, but like I said, there is a lot of challenges in how we implement and how we translate these on the local context. Therefore, it is important to identify local priorities and what are the available resources that the communities have, and align them with these global agendas to leverage capacities, and therefore design context-specific goals and actions for disaster management. Then taking this forward, the third important pillar is evaluating the critical uncertainties and barriers. Sometimes the communities might have certain needs, but there will not be enough resources or enough capacity within the community. So it's important to evaluate what these barriers are and what these uncertainties are. And then lastly, what is most important is, as we see, because we're talking about all these SDGs and even Sendai framework, disaster management, and what we have also learned on the first day and also discussed briefly yesterday was that the disaster management paradigm has changed, and it is a lot about preparedness now. So it has to take into account of anticipation. So therefore, co-creating adaptive future pathways. So we need to have this anticipatory planning. As researchers and planners, if we lack this future time horizon, it would be the biggest mismatch that we'll create on our part. And therefore, for me, how I understand is that these, if you click on the next slide, you will see that these are the 4 pillars that we use in our research for supporting localized action and also localizing SDGs. So I will highlight some of the work that we're doing at the Center of Excellence disaster mitigation and management at IIT Roorkee is we are focusing on very recently, apart from other work that we have done in past on understanding vulnerability at village level, using holistic sustainable development guided frameworks, using indicator based assessment, and I can share those relevant literature if someone is interested. But more recently, we are engaged in understanding the disaster recovery of communities that are impacted by some of the hazards. So what you see here is the map of Uttarakhand, one of the states in India which is highly prone to disasters and natural hazards. So we're looking into natural disasters, and then we're covering villages across the districts in Uttarakhand. And what we're trying to understand is how communities who have been impacted by natural disasters, how are they recovering to it? Can you go to the next slide?
Yes.
Okay, some of the major disasters that these villages have faced in the past, as you can see from the pictures that might have come up on your screen, is that one of the villages is affected by cloudburst. Then the second is by gorge and the flash floods. Then there's cloud blast triggered landslides. So there's a range of disasters that these communities or locals have experienced. And now we're trying to, and we are in a phase of data collection at the moment. So this is a process. This is a project that is ongoing, and we don't have many results at the moment. But one of our main question is to understand that what facilitates or what inhibits the recovery of these local communities when they get impacted by any disaster. We want to also estimate the loss and damages, not in terms of just economical terms, but also in terms of their personal losses, in terms of their mental well-being, the psychosocial issues that arise. So that is a survey that we are planning, that we are already executing, and we shall wait for to finish our work in the 4 more sites, and then we want to take the results forward. So if you come to the next slide.
Yes.
So overall, our work at the Center of Excellence in Disaster Mitigation and Management at IIT Roorkee, we aim to use transdisciplinary process to understand community strategic planning and also help them. It's not how we understand is that the communities have a good understanding of what they need and how the solution should be implemented. So we innovate are trying to learn that from the community and voice those concerns and barriers so that their needs and their needs can be well planned in a strategic manner. And then to align with the shared vision of localizing the SDGs to support potential investment by local government and agencies in places and villages where it's needed, and then help the communities to recover in a just and inclusive way. So making sure that no one is left behind, and that is also one of the global SDGs goal. So I want to thank you, for giving me the opportunity again. And what I see is that there is a lot of very crucial role that the civil societies and organizations like Sewa International have in this effort of localizing the SDGs and making sure we move towards a resilient disaster nation. So thank you again. If there are any questions, please, I'm happy to answer them here, or also please feel free to write to me. My email ID maybe you're seeing it on the last slide. Hello?
Thank you, Dr. Rupam Shukla. The initial technical disaster was overcome since we are very good responders by the technical prowess of Shubhamji, and we came to know the good work that is being done by IIT Roorkee. Dr. Rupam Shukla brought out the link between the SDGs and localized solutions for that. And she covered the work that is being done by IIT Roorkee in the disaster affected villages of Uttarakhand. What is important is, and what was the catch part of a presentation was that localized solutions are the way forward for managing disasters. That is one point that has to be kept in mind. With that, I come to the end of the session. Any is there?
Yeah, please join.
So, Satish ji, welcome, Dr. Satish ji. We are waiting for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you are able to hear me. Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Satish, you're audible. We're just increasing the volume a bit. Give us 30 seconds. You can now speak.
Okay. Yes. So we had been planning about this disaster conference for nearly 3-4 months. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we had been planning about this disaster conference for last 3-4 months. After this COVID experience and working with Sewa International, US Sewa International, we were wondering that the community participation in disaster management is the crux of the matter. Over a period of time in last 20 years, since in 2005, the Disaster Management Act came into being. So now nearly 17 years are over when there has been a legal framework for disaster management activities in our country. Before that, if all we remember is that if there was any disaster, every state used to call the army, that we have to call the army and army will take care of the disaster rescue and search part. And then the government machinery will come into play. But the problem with that system is that army had become nearly a kind of disaster rescue force because wars are far between and you are removing army from their regular training. So you are disturbing the pattern of army. And when you are not disturbing the army, you are using CRPF or other forces arbitrarily, and you are not building on the experience of search and rescue. So there is no institutional memory being created. So the advantage of Disaster Management Act 2005 was that certain institutions were given a legal sanction. One is this National Disaster Response Force, which is one of the only such forces in the world. No other country has such a concept. So here what we have done is that people from CRPF and other security agencies are transferred to this NDRF on a lien basis, and they are experts, and our country is very big and disasters keep on happening. So these people are able to handle search and rescue in a very methodical manner. Then after the Disaster Management Act, government has come out with a good rehabilitation policy for earthquake or for tsunami or for flood. So that also is taken care of. But these are only preparedness and after disaster response. But the first 72 hours of any disaster are very, very important. And in that, only local community is of help. If local community is not trained, if they are not sensitized, and if they are not told about the risk of disasters in their particular areas, then the search and rescue help to the government agencies is also becomes difficult. So this disaster conference is actually a prelude, a kind of a stage set for moving towards setting up NDRN. I am sure you might have talked about it earlier in this conference, or if not, maybe you are going to hear about this NDRN more often in the future. There's National Disaster Response Network. And the idea is that throughout the country, we should create an ecosystem where volunteers who are desirable of search and rescue, participating in search and rescue and other disaster activities, specialized activities, they can register, they can be trained in first aid, they can be trained in other search and rescue operations, and they are given some kind of certificate that in such a disaster area, only such people should be allowed to go. So there is a need to formalize the community participation in disaster response at the local level. This is very, very important. And I am sure that this particular conference throws up some ideas about how to start this NDRN activity. Sewa International Bharat, Rashtriya Seva Bharati, and USA Sewa International and our institution, and with other like-minded people from IIT Roorkee, to name some of them. There are some other 5-6 organizations who are willing to be member of this National Disaster Response Network. And we are sure that over a period of next couple of years, a framework will be there where community participation in disaster response will be streamlined. I think if we are able to do that, such a conference would have served its purpose, that it is not that we are only talking about what has happened so far, but we should be prepared for the future. I think if I have overshot my time of response, I am sorry, but I thought that let me share my, I should have been there for 3 days, all 3 days. Unfortunately, I met with an accident and the doctor told me not to move out of my home for next 2-3 weeks, some fractures in the finger and some open wound. So I am participating from my home. And I hope that, of course, this was an individual accident, not a disaster, but we know that disaster can happen anytime, anywhere, and we should be prepared for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Satish. We wish you early recovery, and whatever inputs you gave, they were very valuable to us, and something new we came to know about this NDRN, and your words on this community participation, I think, are very valuable. And my experience in army also says that first 72 hours are crucial, and that is where the community comes into being. So thank you for your valuable inputs.
Thank you, sir.
I want to thank and compliment my eminent panelists. They have done a creditable and marvelous work in confining themselves on this vast subject in the time allotted. I'm also grateful to the audience for the patient hearing. And hereby I close the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Major General Rajesh Sethi. We faced some hiccups in the session, and despite that, the wide range of SDGs that were covered with various speakers, there are lots of experience sharings. A lot of experience that has come from the past few decades have been shared and exchanged in the last few minutes. I am grateful to all this panel and chair to join us to just share a token of gratitude from our side. I'd request Shyamji Prande to share that small token of gratitude from our side to Major General Rajesh Sethi. Thank you, sir. I'd request Swati. I would request Swati Ramji to facilitate our Honorable Speaker Milinji. I would request our Honorable Trustee Pannalal Bhansali ji to felicitate the team of experts from VESIM, Dr. Jyoti and Dr. Disha. Thank you, Dr. Jyoti. Thank you, Dr. Disha. I would also thank our both speakers who joined us online. Despite the technical difficulties, Dr. Rupam, I thank you for continuing with the session. and giving us a plan of action to how we imagine the correlation between various aspects of managing a disaster and the global sustainable development goals. Thank you, Dr. Rupam. And thank you, Dr. Satish, for not just talking about the work we have done in the past, but also showing some guiding light on what we can do together in the future as a network, as a collective, and as a team of people who want to create sustainable disaster management networks in India. Thank you, Dr. Satish. Thank you all for joining us in this session. The next session is a summary session for the entire conference. We have a few transformative ideas that have come up. We have a lot of reflections that have come up and a lot of collaborative ideas that have emerged in the last few days of the conference. I would request Anuja ji. To come to the dais and quickly share summary of the entire conference on what we have discussed, what we have learned so far, and what we can do together in the future. Anuja Deshpande ji.
Sorry about this. We will have presentation up soon. I hope you all enjoyed the conference for last 2 days, last 3 days. I know it's an information overload, but we all got to learn a lot. We all got the insights from experts, and we hope that each one of us would go home and think about it, reflect on it, and move forward with the takeaways. So can we do a quick interactive session? What we learned from this conference and what we can do going forward. So I just want to ask that we have multiple organizations representing here. Do you think that this conference was a much needed effort to bring all the stakeholders together and work towards the resilient community we want to build? You can raise your hands if yes. Thank you, thank you. What can we do next? So I think the main takeaway was that we are moving from not prepared and responding haphazardly to being prepared in the sense of carrying out relief efforts, how we respond to a disaster. But in this conference, this is my observation, and if you can agree, that it's not only necessary to be more prepared for the relief and rehabilitation or response, but also be prepared for resilience, be prepared for risk mitigation, that if a disaster comes, you're not impacted. Maybe 20%, 30% people still would be impacted. But today, when 100% people are impacted, there is a huge economic loss. How do we do that? Risk mitigation, any recommendations? Please raise your hand, please let us know. It can be a takeaway from the conference, or it can be an idea that you want to propose. Anybody from RSB?
Was covered by Milinji, that there is a need for capacity building. And I think that summarizes what he said.
Yeah, I would like to say something about it. I am a doctor by profession, and that too from the field of preventive and social medicine. As we say that an ounce of prevention is equal to a pound of cure. disasters generally happen, mostly happen rather, due to lack of planning, lack of regulation in development, and carelessness generally. Like today we are facing a huge fire in Sariska Tiger Sanctuary. I'm sure this could have been prevented. I'm very sure this could have been prevented, provided somebody could have thought about it. So we have to think about a disaster, what could happen here, and take the preventive measures. Kedar Ghati, that flood could be avoided, could be prevented. An effort could be made to prevent it at least, provided the Gandhi Lake on the top was taken care of. So there are factors, and we as a community, all of us, institutions, administration, government, everybody has to play a role, an interactive role. And like the state, indicated that another Satish Morji, he indicated that there should be a national disaster response network. So that is the need of the hour today, that we identify the areas where we are going to face the disasters and take the preventive measures well in time. And a single stitch in time saves 9. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You're absolutely right. As somebody pointed out that it's not only we prepare for the disaster in our local community, but we should be prepared and be aware of all kinds of disaster, all stages of disaster, as you mentioned very rightly. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just want to add what Brigadier Chaudhary ne bhi bataya hai. Number of disasters may not be totally avoidable, because a lot of things are natural disaster, they happen, but we can be better prepared to tackle such disasters. For that preparation, what NDRF has started and what Milenji was saying, those are the things which we need. And most important is making the public aware. There should be no confusion. So many people, so many medicines, so many food packets, they come, nobody knows how to distribute it. So all these things, they can be streamlined, and that will only reduce number of casualties also. They'll reduce the way the people get, they suffer for water, they suffer for food, medicines, all these things. Those things can be streamlined, and that can happen only by education, by including this as a subject in our syllabus. That's a very important thing. We have not much touched during the seminar on nuclear. I'll just say that. And nuclear is something, Chernobyl or Fukushima, they can happen. Even in India, we may not be in such a large nuclear power, but nuclear energy plants are in plenty. So is the armed forces, have a number of depots and others. So there is a need, maybe because of confidentiality, there is a little, कि हम उसके बारे में बात नहीं करते, लेकिन there is a need to talk, make people aware क्या क्या हो सकता है और कैसे हम इसको minimize कर सकते हैं. How can we minimize the casualties? It can happen, but we must be prepared for these things also. Biological is another. We did not, Bhopal or Vizag, all these things have happened. So is this virus, which I think we must start calling it Chinese virus and Wuhan virus, because it is no more COVID. I think it was planned. That's my, it was definitely a man-made disaster which has happened. But now I think whether it is true or not, but China is also suffering. So that's it. But these things we must talk. We must talk about it. We must let the people, the children, especially the population, they should not be a panic. We all remember what happened in March, April, May 2020. There was a panic. All these things, if there is a confidence, some amount of confidence in the people, then there will be no panic. This migration of people wouldn't have taken place if the people were a little confident that the government will look after us. So then nobody would have run away. All those things can be, and we can streamline processes, how to do about it. I could have never imagined in my lifetime that there'll be not a rickshaw wala or a cycle wala or a bus or a train or an aircraft running in the country. But it has happened, I have seen it. So we have all seen it. So, and one about the forest. We have done, we did number of exercises in the IMA, this Dehradun, Mussoorie area. There used to be proper fire lanes in the forest. Today, I find the vegetation has grown and those fire lanes have just disappeared. There is a need to create these fire lanes properly and ensure that they get maintained every 2-3 years. They are clean, the vegetation and all is removed so that the fire does not spread. So these type of preventive measures, we must start talking about it, and the seminar that we have had, it's extremely important. I think it has given all of us number of lessons to ponder and move ahead from here. But in syllabus, I think our children must talk about it. These things are important. Global warming is another thing which I feel. I want to leave everyone with a thought because I proposed it. There is a need for very large plantation of trees and all. And one of the ways is raise more territorial army battalions, which does not cost much. They have done wonders in Mussoorie Hills. We all are aware that Mussoorie Hills had just become barren, but today you see the vegetation. And along the Ganges and Yamuna and many other rivers, they can be, and they can be given additional task of desilting. The rivers will not desilt. They can be given a little power for searching people, because illegal activities will not take place along the banks. Hearts will remain clean. And when there is a disaster, these people can be immediately employed for flood relief and earthquake and other things. They are available to the district magistrate. And though, of course, the raising and command remains under the army, 50% are the ex-servicemen and 50% are the local of that area. So this is must, I think we must all raise our voice. It can be used, and global warming can be at least reduced, I think, by plantation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think he has very well summarized, and we have a polling session after this. For 10-15 minutes, we'll ask questions and you just have to raise your hands, yes or no. And some of the questions that you answered already are covered in those. So we'll get to know consensus, what people think. With this, I'll start my presentation. Like you said, there is a little bit unorganized way of responding to disaster. There is a lot of wastage. People don't know where the food is going, where the water is going, where are the resources going. So what actually we need with this issue, the recommendation for us would be, we need a capacity building of the CSOs, and we also need a standardization of practices. The terminology that we all agree to, we all know, and we all use during, before, and after disaster. But what do we do for that? We have to collaborate as CSOs with government agencies and standardize these practices. In last few sessions, we also saw that there is, we also saw that there is lack of coordination with regional stakeholders. At national level, many organizations might be working. But there is need for localized, there is need for localized management. So when a national organization is taking decisions, the local agencies that are actually working on ground, they feel left out. And the actual knowledge of the community lies with those people. So we have to take into account their feedback and their decisions and align with our goals, align with the national goals. So that is what we need to do. Sorry again. The other issue that we discussed during the sessions was we get a lot of foreign funding. There are NGOs that bring in foreign funding and there is no accountability or transparency as to how those funds are spent. So having a leader and an indigenous organization at the top level that is able to raise funds and distribute it and maintain the transparency. How do we do that? Again, collaboration. Mahesh Ji Kamble was here yesterday. He raised an issue of living standards below par. Why is disaster impacting so many people in India? And he very well mentioned that, you know, the regular living conditions are so poor that disaster doesn't need to happen for them to be affected. But when disaster happens, the impact is huge. What do we do to address that? We have to work with the government, with the local agencies, with the local panchayats to get the better living standards. And that is how we want to build resilience. We are moving from relief response to building a resilience community, preparing for disasters. So that was one point that we covered in the conference in last 2 days. On very first day, if many of us were present here, we had Srikanji from USA. He presented a very nice point saying that, informing us that there is FEMA and NVOD in USA. What is the importance of such organizations? FEMA is one organization that it's a government organization, but the entire effort for disaster management, all the decisions go through FEMA. Even though the local stakeholders have their own decisions to make, have a feedback, but the flow of resources, the direction of this disaster relief and response goes through FEMA. Do we have anything like that in India? It's my question. We may not, but mostly we do not have it. And that is the need of the hour. The other organization was NVOAD. What is NVOAD? It is not under government. It's a private network of organizations that are active in disaster. In India, so many communities work on emotions. When the disaster strikes, you get emotional and you jump into the effort. But if you organize these efforts, we can achieve so much more. And NVOAD, a network of organizations, is the need, is what we want to achieve efficient disposal of resources. So these are 2 points that I feel that we should work on in India. The last session yesterday was technology. Very important, right? So in this entire conference, what is the issue that we face? Can anyone tell me? Technology, right? My presentation was not being able to connect. Why? We have no disaster here, right? But we have a connectivity problem, right? We have a lack of technological skills, है ना? प्रेजेंटेशन तो बना लिया हमने, लेकिन उसको कनेक्ट भी करना है. जब डिजास्टर आएगा, मेरे पास फोन है, आपके पास फोन है, फायदा क्या? कनेक्ट ही नहीं होगा. How do we tackle this problem, right? Indigenous development of technology is very important. Something that works in India for Indian people is very important. Something we bring from USA will not work. This was the point covered. Like yesterday, Saritaji said, drones from Switzerland or USA cannot work in India because of temperature sensitivity. How do we address this? So we need financial support as well as technology support, skills support for developing the technology in India. There is a problem of data mining. आज कितने लोग हैं ऐसे जो ग्राउंड पे काम करते हैं? RSV करता है, सेवा इंटरनेशनल करता है, बहुत सारे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से जो करते हैं, ग्राउंड पे काम करते हैं. कितने लोग डेटा कैप्चर कर पाते हैं? नहीं कर पाते, मोस्टली नहीं कर पाते क्योंकि we are involved in helping people. We don't care about capturing their data. But ये डेटा कैप्चर करना भी इम्पोर्टेंट है ताकि नेक्स्ट टाइम जब डिजास्टर आए, we are prepared. That is how we build a resilient community. That we have data in place, we know how to, when to help who. Very important. इसके लिए भी हम क्या कर सकते? सब काम तो हम नहीं कर सकते, राइट? सब कामों के लिए हम सक्षम नहीं हैं. We don't have the capacity, skills to do that. Therefore, important to collaborate with organizations that do. कुछ ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस ऐसी है जो सिर्फ डेटा माइनिंग पे काम करती हैं. कैन वी टैप इनटू दोस? बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट सब्जेक्ट है. नेक्स्ट इज अपने यहाँ पे हर स्टेट हैज अ डिफरेंट कल्चर. इंडिया में I don't want to bore you with more points, but this is the last slide I promise. अपने आप ही इंडिया में बहुत कल्चरल डिफरेंसेस नहीं, वैरायटी है, डाइवर्सिटी है, राइट? तो इसमें क्या हो जाता है कि whenever there is a disaster, we focus on helping people. But इस चक्कर में we forget that there is a damage to cultural, ethical values. There is a damage to biodiversity. Can we address this problem? What is the recommendation? इसमें पहले दिन ये डिस्कस हुआ था कि there are 4 steps that you have to go through. जैसे यूक्रेन एफर्ट में उन्होंने किया था. What did they do? Strategize. अगर प्रिपेयर्डनेस जैसे आपने कहा कि हर हजार्ड के लिए हमारा प्रिपरेशन चाहिए पहले से, तो प्रिपरेशन कैसे करेंगे? उसके लिए स्ट्रैटेजी चाहिए. You have to strategize. We have to have a logistical backing. Logistical backing गवर्नमेंट की साइड से भी आएगा, CSOs की साइड से भी आएगा. और ये सब करने के लिए कोऑर्डिनेशन का होना जरूरी है ना? एंड ये सारा जो है स्ट्रैटेजाइज, लॉजिस्टिकल बैकिंग, कोऑर्डिनेशन, ये अलग अलग संस्था करेगी, एक नहीं कर सकती. इसका मतलब अपने लिए इट इज नेसेसरी टू हैव कोलैबोरेशन इन प्लेस. और ये सब होना है बिफोर डिजास्टर स्ट्राइक्स. तो हर एक स्टेट का हर एक टाइप का डिजास्टर स्टडी करना है, उसके लिए स्ट्रैटेजाइज करना है, उसके लिए लॉजिस्टिकल बैकिंग चाहिए, प्लानिंग चाहिए, कोऑर्डिनेशन चाहिए और कोलैबोरेशन चाहिए. तो दैट इज हाउ वी कैन बिल्ड रेजिलियंस. लेकिन उसके लिए डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट को सीरियसली लेना जरूरी है सबने, स्पेशली स्टूडेंट्स हु आर हियर फ्रॉम डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट कोर्स. ये आपके ऊपर है. द ओनस इज ऑन यू, हाउ यू प्लान दिस. ठीक है? अभी लास्ट चीज है कि व्हाई दिस थिंग्स हैपन. लैक ऑफ अवेयरनेस इन पीपल. यहाँ पे कितने लोगों ने डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट का ट्रेनिंग लिया हुआ है, या चलो CPR का ट्रेनिंग लिया हुआ है? कैन यू रेज योर हैंड्स? है? कितने लोग हैं अपने यहाँ पे आज प्रेजेंट? 50 पीपल. आउट ऑफ देम 10 पीपल, मतलब 20% लोगों ने लिया हुआ है. आज यहाँ पे डिजास्टर होता है तो 20% लोग बच जाएंगे, बाकी का क्या होगा वी डोंट नो. तो क्या करना है? सबसे पहले अवेयरनेस चाहिए लोगों में कि मैं प्रिपेयर हूं कि नहीं. कल मेरे यहाँ फ्लड आता है तो मैं क्या करूंगा, मैं कम्युनिटी को कैसे हेल्प करूंगा. ये जो प्रिपेयर्डनेस है, अवेयरनेस है, ये हमको लाना है. और ये कौन ला सकता है? आपके जैसे यंग वॉलंटियर्स. आज जो आप यहाँ पे आए हो, कल आप 5 लोगों को लेके आओगे, जैसे स्वाति जी ने कहा था. आज हम यहाँ पे है एज अ वॉलंटियर, कल हम 5 लोगों को और जोड़े, उनको ट्रेन करें, ऐसे कम्युनिटी बढ़ेगी. आप 5 लोगों को ट्रेन करोगे, आप अपनी कम्युनिटी में जाके और 10-15 लोगों को ट्रेन करोगे, तो ये अवेयरनेस इज वेरी वेरी नेसेसरी. देयर इज, चलिए मेरे को नोट आ गया है कि अभी मुझे खत्म करना है, तो ठीक है मैं यहाँ पे रोक देती हूँ. बट नॉलेज ट्रांसमिशन इज ऑल्सो अनदर इम्पोर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट कि सबके साथ नॉलेज शेयरिंग होना चाहिए. ठीक है, पोल करेंगे. अभी हम छोटा सा पोल करेंगे, फिर अनिल जी विल टॉक अबाउट ट्रांसफॉर्मेशंस की, कैसे हम लोग ये ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन ला सकते हैं, इम्प्लीमेंटेशन ऑफ दिस आइडियाज. तो फटाफट करेंगे. कितना टाइम है अपने पास? रूल्स ये है कि अगर आपका ओपिनियन यस है तो आप हाथ ऊपर करेंगे. क्वेश्चन 1, हैव यू एक्सपीरियंस्ड एनी और ऑल ऑफ दिस डिजास्टर्स? वेरी गुड. फिर भी अपने अंदर प्रिपेयर्डनेस नहीं है. डू यू हैव एक्सपीरियंस इन द एरिया ऑफ डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट? कितने लोगों को है? अच्छा. हैव यू टेकन एनी ट्रेनिंग फॉर डिजास्टर रिस्पॉन्स? ये तो हमने अभी पूछ लिया. डू यू सी द नीड फॉर कोलैबोरेशन इन डिजास्टर प्रिपेयर्डनेस एंड रिस्क मिटिगेशन? वंडरफुल वंडरफुल. आप लोग को नहीं लगता, जो पीछे बैठे हैं, लगता है हाथ ऊपर करना है, पार्टिसिपेशन जरूरी है. If such collaborative initiatives taken up, would your organization be willing to join that effort? If you form the network, would you be participating? Wonderful, that's a great feedback. अभी आपके पास sticky note होगा, उसके ऊपर आपको अपना response लिखना है. In which area of disaster management do you see need for collaboration? Particular किस area में आपको लगता है कि collaboration तो must है? Relief, rehabilitation, advocacy या capacity building या all of the above. So आप you can just put A, B, C, D, E. You can prioritize or you can say E, all of the above, or you can say B, C, A, D, anything is fine. उनको आपको दिख रहे questions? Okay. A is relief, B is rehabilitation, C is advocacy for CSOs, D is capacity building, and E is all the above. Next करेंगे question. Question is it important to create a forum for sharing best practices? Yes, yes, absolutely. Do you think there is a need to create a team to register volunteers for disaster training like NIDM? जो forums available है सारे. Yeah. तो आप में से कोई लोग, I'm hoping, will volunteer for this team. Do you agree on the concept of one stakeholder taking lead in facilitating the disaster management effort? No? Okay. Sure. Could CSOs play a vital role in integrating disaster training in education system? Someone mentioned that, right? So बच्चों को ये थोड़ा सा ट्रेनिंग या कुछ नॉलेज देना चाहिए क्या, और सीएसओ कैसे हेल्प कर सकते हैं इसमें, ये क्वेश्चन है. Could CSOs be involved in resilient and sustainable infrastructure building? मतलब अपनी कैपेबिलिटी है क्या अभी इतनी? Something that we can think about. One recommendation, sorry. Yeah. This is in reference to what Govindji said yesterday. He talked about, yeah. So how can we help that? Any recommendations we are, you can write it on sticky note and we can take this. One recommendation after listening to all the sessions. If you can pass the mic, maybe. कोई recommendation particular में है? जी.
I've been a part of the armed forces and particularly the marine forces for more than 36 years. And I can suggest based on my experience, I do agree with Satishji when he said that earlier there was an over dependence on the armed forces to call for the relief work and responses. And I myself have seen many catastrophic situations, particularly in the coastal areas when the tsunami struck, when the cyclone struck, and ultimately we had the resources, we didn't know what to do with it. There was no channelization of efforts, there was no coordination. So I'll be very brief because I know that we are running short of time. So what we did is, initially when there was an over dependence on the Coast Guard to provide them relief in the aftermath of the cyclones, what we did is we started involving the fisher villages. We went to the Sarpanch, we went to the Mukhia, we went to the village head and said we want to conduct lectures for your local people. As you said, that government cannot be everywhere. The first responders are the local community. So we started providing them training, we started providing them with the lectures and whatever our local area commanders. It was the task given to them that you will conduct a training program for all these local fisher villages. And we were very happy and we were pleasantly surprised that when the cyclone struck afterwards, the people were very well prepared to take on to the challenges which came forward. So this, my suggestion is that the training part and the involvement of the local community is the must, and rest everything comes afterwards. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next session would be conducted by Anilji. It's a short session about transformations and how we can implement all the recommendations that we got. Anilji.
I don't need this. बंद कर दें. सबको नमस्कार. We have been here for the past 2 days, reflecting, thinking of collaborations, and imagining transformational change. So सब लोग अपना अपना चिंतन कर रहे थे, तो मैं भी कर रहा था अपने ओर से वहां बैठ के. So let me play the role of a devil's advocate for a minute. I'll give you 2 propositions. We are a nation in transition. We have good highways, or at least they're getting built, but human behavior and habits haven't evolved commensurately. हमारे आदत वैसे ही हैं पुराने. That is one thing. Second thing is, based on my experience in working in rural and community development, कई सालों से देख रहा हूँ देश में क्या हो रहा है नहीं हो रहा है. Our communities have high resilience to cope with disasters, but short memory and no demands for closure. We never demand a closure. वो चलते रहता है कई सालों तक. So based on this, ये तो मेरे ओर से था. और पिछले 3 दिनों में वक्ताओं ने जो समझ बनाई हमारी, उसमें 2-3 विषय आपके समक्ष रखता हूँ. उदाहरण के लिए, NDRF has been able to reach out for community awareness only to about 57 lakh people. That is less than half of 1% of our population. So imagine when we are placing more emphasis on survivors and local communities being the first responders, बाकी 99% लोगों का capacity building कब होगा, कैसे होगा, कौन करेगा? So that's a long question and a long path for us to take. And the beauty is, more than half of our country's geographical area, I believe, is disaster prone, 56% of it, as they said. So it means it is spread all over the country. तो उसको भी ध्यान में रखते हुए हम लोगों को आगे बढ़ना चाहिए जो भी करेंगे. And we have something positive again. So it seems, as Professor Sachin Chaturvedi had said the other day, we are a net ODA provider now as a country, overseas development, whatever support that we give. We do take some support, but more than that, we are giving it to other countries, including during the present pandemic. So in this context, there are a couple of things. Do we have some channel to provide this assistance to other countries? Or if something comes into our country, is there a CSO channel which will help in distributing or disseminating this? So there's a challenge. Some other countries have, some first world countries do have that. And on the other hand, we have been lamenting on the lamenting, or rather saying gladly, that we are moving from an organized way of responding to a disaster to something which is more prepared and more organized. But some of the speakers have given us a reality check. उदाहरण के लिए आज मिलिंद जी कह रहे थे कि क्या-क्या समस्याएं हैं इसमें. Although it is assumed that we are moving towards that, जैसे NDRF ने अपने प्रदर्शन किया है इधर, so they are doing tremendous work and commendable work, but still we have a long way to go. And then let's come to who will build the capacities of the local communities. So obviously, if you do a SWOT analysis, it will be the civil society organizations who are more equipped to handle that. But then the state of civil societies in our country, whether they are NGOs or academia or any of those other CBOs that are involved, we are a long way off in terms of our awareness and preparedness or readiness to receive any such capacity building inputs. तो उसके लिए एक तैयारी है. So there is a role for CSOs in pre, during and post. Because in the post phase, as was discussed today morning, that we can align them with our SDGs and achieve them by 2030 in a much better manner, looking at an opportunity. वो एक चीज था. And preparedness, because अभी तक हो नहीं रहा है, so we need to, everybody was emphasizing the need for preparedness, so that जैसे हमारे आर्मी के कई सीनियर लीडर्स जो मेजर जनरल्स थे वो भी बोल रहे थे कि if we sweat more in the peace time, then we shed less blood during war time. So the same analogy will work for this. On the other hand, जैसे एक वक्ता ने कहा, बिहार के एक किसी एनजीओ कार्यकर्ता ने कहा, the relation between विकास and विनाश. विकास ऐसा हो जो विनाश से बचाए और विकास ऐसा हो जो विनाश ना होने दें. So it's a very interesting concept. That's where the SDGs come in. So are our development efforts sustainable? And there was also a talk of sustainable disaster management and disaster risk reduction by the UNDP officials over here. So that's where we are moving to, or that's where we should be moving perhaps. And then there was this talk of multi-stakeholder collaboration. Multi-stakeholder not only among CEOs, but also across the board. CSOs, academia, private sector. There were examples of how private sector was also involved in handling disasters by some of the speakers. So how do we ensure that such community, such collaborations come up? And also there was this need emphasized for a decentralized architecture for disaster risk reduction and management. Especially there were presentations by our US counterparts. They were explaining how their system works. And finally, there was this talk of harnessing our technological abilities in predicting, mitigating effects of disaster and for quickly bouncing back to normal. COVID lagbhag samapt ho gaya, but then yesterday one of the speakers, I think Kamleji, mentioned that the government is still continuing with its support for free rations because people really have not yet bounced back to normalcy. So we need some mechanism to enable people to come back rapidly to their original state of affairs. And finally, there is some loud thinking which I was doing with one of my anonymous colleagues in Sewa International yesterday. इसमें दो चार बिंदु है. अगर सिविल सोसाइटी का इतना महत्व है और हर कोई कह रहा था कि सेवा इंटरनेशनल बहुत अच्छा काम किया हुआ है, they had also presented a report based on the work that was done by Sewa International, and others were also sort of saying good words about Sewa International. I am also a कार्यकर्ता of Sewa International, by the way. तो इसमें दो चार विषय है. So why are we aptly positioned to take a leadership role in creating such a network, in leading it, and then working towards this paradigm shift that was being talked about. इसमें दो चार बिंदु है. There is a felt need and scope for dedicated network. There is a rich and long experience of Sewa International in disaster management across the country and globally for about 25 years. So we are not just armchair workers. I mean, there is a real hard work that backs our thoughts, and large number of volunteers and like-minded CSOs in our ecosystem with which we can collaborate and work with, and also others outside the system. And since we believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and hence can provide thought and action leadership among the CSOs. I mean, I've seen networks, but networks are of various types, and there are apprehensions about networks. So maybe we can overcome those apprehensions and create and lead a good network. And we have the ability to leverage resource generation capacities in terms of financial knowledge and human resources. So with this, maybe we can design a way forward and transform the way that disaster management was being done in our country. So maybe in the years to come, we'll have a much better approach to disaster risk reduction. That's what they were talking about, and disaster mitigation if it happens, and overall disaster management. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
We are just one step away from the final valedictory session of the conference. We'll take a quick 5-minute bio break and reassemble in the same hall in 5 minutes. People who want to stay can stay back in the hall. Namaste, everyone. Request the delegates to please take in their seats. Welcome to the last session of the conference on disaster management. I would like to begin this session, the valedictory session, with a quick anecdote that happened just yesterday. Few of the students from Jawaharlal Nehru University were here, and over the table during the night, they were having a discussion, what does a conference achieve? Some people said it's like a pat on the back for the organization which is organizing it. Some people said it helps people network with people who are working on a similar field, sharing similar interest. And one nice gentleman, I don't remember the name, I was just overhearing the conversation, said, "Likha to hai samne, reflection, collaboration, and transformation. Have we achieved that or not? Is something that I leave to all of you. And I leave it to the team who is going to follow up from the proceedings of the conference. But one thing I've definitely done is that all of us are more aware about the facets of disaster management that we were before. So definitely a lot of knowledge has either been shared or has been curated by the churnings that have happened as part of the conference. Be it understanding how SDGs link to a disaster, be it about understanding how a disaster can be mitigated. I hope this churn transforms to something more beautiful and sustainable and helps us mitigate, prevent, and create sustainable disaster management practices. And I again welcome you all to the valedictory session of the Disaster Management Conference. I would just request the guests present on the dais to start the valedictory session with the lighting of the lamp and Saraswati Vandana.
man-made disaster. And this COVID is doubted to be a man-made disaster. Even floods are sometimes man-made. Our citizens, most of our citizens are not responsible. We lagged in two things which should come during the time of independence. One is responsibility, another is self-esteem. We found highest upper looting the nation by 475 crores inside the jail. We found parliamentarians asking questions as brokers of the companies have brought ill reputation to the parliament. We found doctors asking for money in the operation table. Why? विज्ञान के द्वारा बेईमान को ईमानदार नहीं बनाया जा सकता है, भ्रष्टाचारी को सदाचारी नहीं बनाया जा सकता है, देशद्रोही को देशभक्त नहीं बनाया जा सकता. Many university students are here, and we found how our university students, some teachers also shouted, भारत को टुकड़ा टुकड़ा करने तक हमारा जंग जारी रहेगा. This is a betrayal of the people who pay for our money, pay for our education, luxury, comfort, everything else. We cannot betray the poor taxpayers who are responsible for our comfort and luxury. And some people build their houses on drains, blocking the natural passage of water, build their boundaries, so that blockage of natural passage of water makes the flow of water more forceful, more violent, and which may be responsible for washing away village. And people suffer. For the irresponsibility of a few people, the mass suffers. Here the responsibility of common citizen and the land authority, revenue authority is quite essential. They should not be allowed to build such illegal and inhuman construction. If at all it is constructed, mercilessly they should be evicted. We cannot put others to danger. This should be done. And there should be a standard operating procedure before the disaster begins, during the disaster, and after the disaster ends. Before the disaster begins, what can we do? We can do many things. I cannot prescribe, but one or two hints I can give. The present society in which we live in is the product of the particular discipline of human mind, which we may call modern science. Science and technology has enabled us to get all information well in advance of the commencement of the disaster. So we can accumulate these informations. We can share our information, knowledge, and experience with others. And we can develop a best practice. And we can evacuate people to safety zones. Their movable properties can be shifted also. We can make all comfortable arrangements for their food, accommodation, light, medical aid, everything else there. And there can be also, we can shift the animals also. We can make arrangement for their food also, who are very much neglected. Many cows dies out of pollution, out of infection, and out of loss of food and water. And those who could not be evacuated, we can provide food and other necessities there. So we have to store everything else in those areas, in the GPs and other storerooms, sufficiently in advance before the commencement of the disaster. And during the disaster, some rescue operation may be made. And after the disaster also, we have to make immediate survey. We have to provide immediate polythene and other things. We have to make assessment of the losses and provide for compensation, etc. Besides that, we shall have to think how to prevent these disasters. Suppose flood, cyclone, how can we prevent? Can we provide pakka houses to all? Government is giving many houses under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. But if you go on having a survey, you will find 99% of Indira Awas, not Pradhan Mantri Awas, are not habitable because of the cheating business. Many contractors have looted the money and many houses are not complete. Even in Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, in many states, the houses are not complete, but bill has been taken. Why? Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. That will be a biggest boon to prevent, because mud houses are washed away. So Pakka house to everyone is a necessity. Secondly, and we are creating very weak infrastructure because of our dishonesty. We can map what is the height of the water that is come, what is the force of the discharge of the water. So accordingly, the height of the embankment should be met. And it should be covered with wire banding and cement structures, compartments, so that it will last long. Besides that, cyclone and flood shelters in cyclone flood prone areas should be increased. But behind all these things, what we need is a heart to love and excellence. In our Upanishads, it is said that Yadevo karoti vidyaya sraddhaya upanisada tadevo viryavatram bhavati utkarsataram bhavati. If you want to excel in something, you have to know the technical know-how. If you want to electrify a house, you must be knowing the electrical engineering. Otherwise, you may find it very much dangerous. But Upanishad says mere technical know-how is not enough. You must have a Shraddha, Vidya Shraddhaya. You must have Shraddha. Shraddha, because of Shraddha, Nachiketa went to face the god of death to know the truth. Upanishad says, why he went? Why he stayed there for 3 days without any food and rest? Because Shraddha avivesa. If you have Shraddha, faith, then you can do miracles. Upanishad says it is not enough. If you have Vidya and Shraddha, still it is not enough. The third element which will complete the whole process is Upanishada. You must think about very deeply. What is the motive power behind this work? Why should you work? Why should you give? If you want to give something to get in return, then it is not Upanishada. You have to think of very deeply. Swami Vivekananda, when he was moving in America without food, one day took rest in the packing case. And the next day he became a great man. And even royal families are in line to provide hospitality to him. He was crying the whole day on the first day of his hospitality. After he became very famous in the parliament religions, he was hosted by a very rich man. And the whole night he could not sleep. He was crying on the ground. The next day morning, when the house owner came and he was astonished, Swami Vivekananda, why did you leave the cot and why are you lying on the ground? Why are you crying? What is my mistake? Please tell me. Vivekananda, with voice choked with emotion, told, no, that's not your mistake. Sir, this is a mistake of Vivekananda. Should I take this sort of hospitality, luxurious hospitality, being a representative of a poor nation where many people, many women, many children in Calcutta, Delhi, Bombay, Madras are lying by the side of the rail station without a house, without any dress, without any food, without any facility to health services, without any facility for education. So this made me cry. And this set of love prompts us to work vigorously with a madness that is unmatched. And you people are working in this field. I congratulate you all. This nation is very great. It is not created by the social contract theory. It's eternal, as old as the creation itself. Our forefathers emphatically at the top of their voice declared thousands of years ago, Krananta Vishwamaryam, we shall educate the whole universe. With this burning passion in their heart, they dedicated their lives. And Swami Vivekananda also told us that when he was asked, Swamiji, you are a sannyasi. Why this service for the nation? Why this service for the people? Swamiji told that one who cannot serve his mother cannot serve the world. Once a group of young men came to him to discuss about religion from Punjab, and Swamiji started discussing about what was their activities during the famine, during the flood. What did you do, young people? And then after half an hour discussion, they told that Swamiji, we are very much disappointed because we came to talk religion, but you are talking about public service. Swamiji told, what religion can a slave nation have? So long as a dog in my country is without food, my whole religion shall be to feed it. I can go to hell several times for the salvation of a dog. Then the entire atmosphere was changed and the whole young people were transformed with these words. This set of strength of character is necessary. Sisters and brothers, we as a nation have a very glorious tradition. Our future is much greater. I remember our Parampujane Sarsanga Chalak during the COVID pandemic told, Ekantame Atma Sadhana, Lokantame Paropakar. The great message to all of us. And our Honorable Prime Minister has told, Sewa hi Sangathan. Our organization is only in Seva. During COVID, during abnormalcy, there is no other organization, only Seva. Seva in COVID centers, Seva in villages, taking people to hospitals, providing them with different materials, PPE kits, etc. These are your organizations. We should know the relevance of Seva because I am an individual part of the society. By serving others, I only serve myself. Before concluding, I will quote another saying of Swami Vivekananda about love. When Yudhishthira was asked by Draupadi in the forest, you see, you are so religious, so pious. But Kauravas are so irreligious. They enjoy the world, but we are suffering so much. Then Yudhishthira laughed and told Draupadi, I love this Himalayas not to get anything from him because this grandeur makes me love him. I love Lord not to get anything from him. There cannot be any trade in love. Love for love's sake. I love my people. Swami Vivekananda told, love opens the most impossible gates. Love is the gate to all the secrets of the universe. Feel therefore my would-be reformers, my would-be patriots. Do you feel? Do you feel that millions and millions of the descendants of gods and of sages have become next door neighbors to brutes? Do you feel that millions are starving for ages and millions are being starving now? Do you feel that ignorance has come over the land as a dark cloud? Does it make you restless? Does it make you sleepless? Has it gone into your blood, coursing through your veins and becoming consonant with your heartbeats? Has it made you almost mad? Are you seized with that one idea of the misery of ruin and have you forgotten all about your name, your fame, your wives, your children, your properties, even your own bodies? Have you done that? That is the first step to become a patriot, the very first step. Now let us measure with this measuring rod to what extent we are patriots. With this I conclude.
Thank you so much, sir. In the last few minutes, we got the message of Swami Vivekananda, we got the message of service, we got the management of what it means to be on the ground with the community that you have lived your life with and to serve them and live a life of service. Thank you so much, sir, for these inspiring words. I would request our keynote speaker, G. Satish Reddy ji, to come. It's before that, sir, I understand that. That's right. I'll request G. Satish Reddy ji to please share quick remarks on the session. I remember, sir, when our team met you at your office, we discussed about the ideas of how to make technology to the ground. I look forward to listening to you, sir. Thank you.
Namaskar. Sri Sarangi ji, Shamparande ji, Major General Ajay Seth ji, Panalal Bansala ji, Mittal ji, and all other people who are present here. Very good afternoon. It's already late. It's crossing 2 o'clock. All of you must be also tired. Firstly, let me congratulate Sewa International for organizing this conference for 3 days on disaster management. Why Sewa International should do this I think I'll a little reserve it and I'll talk about it later. Normally, whenever we have an unforeseen circumstances we face, could be unprecedented also, or otherwise also, and it causes a lot of concerns or issues or problems to the humankind or planet Earth. We can call it as a disaster. Many times it is not unprecedented, but it is unforeseen. So you are not prepared to face it. And so the disasters come into picture, and which can cause a lot of problems to the humankind or the planet Earth again. And so one is how well we are prepared for such circumstances, or once they occur, what are the actions what we are taking and how do we actually work on this. So there are actually a couple of points which I have noted down. When you look at it, disaster management cycle has multiple stages, whether it is mitigation, preparedness, or response, or recovery. These are all the cycle, disaster management cycle wise. When you look at goals of disaster management, you talk about reduce or avoid losses from these things. This is one thing, hazards. That is what actually people, we call it as disaster risk reduction, DRR. Also talk about whatever the assistance or prompt assistance what we give to the victims, and also achieve rapid and effective recovery. This the goals for disaster management when we talk about it, when we look at it. The key points of effective disaster management are knowledge of the assets, technologies and protocols, very important, clear communications, and comprehensive training, and healthcare facilities. And when you look at disaster preparedness plan, identify organizational resources, designate roles and responsibilities, create procedures and policies, organize activities, improve disaster readiness. These are the top level when you look at it, what when a disaster you have to face it and how well you are facing it. That is what I was coming to the fundamental point. Sewa International taking up this task of disaster management. Meaning is, when a disaster, you face a disaster, how well the society or people are responding to it is the fundamental thing. How you respond, what you respond is a secondary thing. How people are motivated and how people are collectively together jointly with multiple organizations. I think that's the point what Shamparandaji also mentioned in his talk, is what matters. Because many of the disasters you do not know when they occur, why they occur, what time they occur, and what the disaster occurs also you do not know. How well we are able to respond to it as the people. So that is where actually the Sewa comes in. In the each and every person, what type of a motivation you have, a dedication you have to work for this. That's the fundamental thing. Let's say you take the COVID, and the moment the COVID has come, how the country has responded, this country. Look at, I have to tell about the organization, so I'm telling. The day Honorable Prime Minister has declared the lockdown, in fact, I'll tell you, in all the laboratories, the scientists actually did not sit at home and they came to the laboratories. And from my side, I get direction, whatever you think you can do, we do it. Very next day in 24 hours, sanitizers came. 48 hours, 72 hours, masks came. 96 hours or plus, the PPEs came. From there onwards, everybody got inspired on their own, working on making the industries, technologies, transfers. Imagine 1,000 PPEs per year. And within about 20 days, we started producing almost about 10 lakh PPEs a day. That is the type of response this country got. We were not having good ventilators in this country. On April 11, on April 3rd or 4th, the group of secretaries which Honorable Prime Minister has formed for this management said we should have our own ventilator, otherwise we will not be getting anything from outside. Industries are closed, no component is coming from outside, no flights are there. But in that condition, a very high-end ventilator was designed, developed, tested, certified, and 30,000 ventilators were delivered to this nation on 14th of August. 30,000 ventilators hired. That is how the people responded. So look from there. There was a small oxygen plant on the Tejas aircraft for the pilots, and that has been converted into big oxygen plant which can produce 1,000 liters per minute. And Honorable Prime Minister gave the decision, then next 3-4 months you have to produce about 1,000 oxygen plants, and PM CARES funds he has given, and people responded. See, normally to place an order of 500 crores, we take about 8 months to 1 year. I'm telling you, Honorable Prime Minister signed that file at evening 5 o'clock, 6:30 tenders were floated, 8 o'clock quotations came, 9:30 negotiation completed, 10:05 PM, about 472 crores order placed. This is the way people have worked. That is what is response. How we work, whatever conditions are different and all that. So people have to work this type of conditions. In these conditions, these 1,000 plants have been established all over the country, Nagaland, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, Andaman and all also. People have worked dedicatedly. Creating that atmosphere, creating that motivation, creating the dedication, creating the collectiveness is the most important thing. So all of us should have the bent of mind to work for facing this type of a disaster situations, and what we can give to the society, how we can help the society in all small thing to possible things is the most important thing what is required. And that's how Sewa International is organizing this, because Sewa is the most important thing in this whole thing facing the disaster. I don't want to say further beyond this, and my best wishes. Keep yourself prepared, keep motivating the people, keep motivating the groups, create the groups which can work for any disaster to come. Last 2 decades, we had about 12,587 disasters. And leaving aside the COVID, 1.47 million people have died out of the disasters. And COVID alone has made more than 5 million people die. And it has affected more than about 2.5 billion people in the world. This is the type of a scenario. So you are prone for disasters, that is what it says. And so we should be prepared in our mind itself to face these situations. And I congratulate once again Sewa International for organizing this, and Sewa International and all of us should be motivating the people in the country to work for such situations. Thank you. Jai Hind. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. When technology meets service, I suppose India can transform. 2 of our guests are running low on time. We'll just require 2 of our seniors to hand over mementos to our guests. I request Vijay Puranik ji and Lieutenant General V.K. Chaturvedi ji. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Satish ji. The valedictory session would continue, and I would request the Honorable Chair for this session, Pannalal Bansali ji, to share the valedictory address.
प्रताप चंद्र संघी जी अभी भी जब जा रहे हैं, अभी हमारे साथ थे, और सतीश सेठ जी DRDO से भी थे, दोनों को जाना पड़ रहा है किसी अर्जेंट कार्य के लिए। अजय सेठ जी मेजर जनरल, उनके हमने उद्बोधन नहीं सुना, उससे पहले इसे आगे वाले सेशन में भी भाई साहब थे और उनसे पूरा हमें डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट के बारे में काफी जानकारी मिली। आपने आर्मी के अनुभव भी शेयर किए। श्याम जी पांडे भाई साहब का सहयोग, और ये जो टीम देख रहे हैं आज, ये पूरी टीम, यंग टीम, खासतौर से शुभम जी, आशीष जी और निशांत जी ने जिस तरह से इस टीम को बनाया है, ये जो यंग फेसेज हैं, आज इसी के कारण ये इतना बड़ा कार्यक्रम इतना सुस्मूथ हो रहा है। इनके लिए मैं आपसे आग्रह करूंगा सबसे कि इनसे इंटरेक्ट भी करें इंडिविजुअली। सब अपने आप में, ये जो बच्चे दिख रहे हैं आपको, ये अपने आप एक संस्था है, और इस तरह के जो कार्यक्रम हो रहे हैं इनमें इन्हीं का योगदान है। हम लोग तो साले इनको मोटिवेट करने के लिए, साथ में बैठ के इस कार्य को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए एक चिंतन मात्र करते हैं, बाकी पूरी एक्टिविटीज इनके द्वारा होती है। ये मेरा सौभाग्य है आज सेवा इंटरनेशनल द्वारा आयोजित 3 दिवसीय आपदा प्रबंधन की कॉन्फ्रेंस में सम्मिलित हो रहा हूँ। 2 दिनों के अंदर में आपने देखा होगा कि 28 और 29 को क्या हुआ। 30 को मैं खुद यहाँ साथ में था, तो मुझे भी आप सबके साथ में रहने का मौका मिला और पता लग रहा है कि इसकी इम्पोर्टेंस क्या है। शायद अभी देश के अंदर में अवेयरनेस की बहुत कमी है। काफी आपदाएं आने से पहले हमें पता चलती है। आजकल क्योंकि टेक्नोलॉजी का एडवांसमेंट हो गया, तो हम उसकी कुछ तैयारी कर लेते हैं, चाहे वो फ्लड की हो, चाहे वो किसी तरह बादल फटने की हो, या कोई समुद्री कोई घटना हो। लेकिन बहुत सी आपदा है जो बिना समय, बिना वार्निंग दे आती है। उन सब के लिए कैसे प्रिपरेशन करना है, किस तरह की हमारी मानसिकता होनी चाहिए, उसके ऊपर में बड़ा अच्छा चिंतन हुआ, और उस चिंतन को हम आगे बढ़ाएंगे। आज जैसे हम दिल्ली में बैठे हैं, हो सकता है इसी तरह की कॉन्फ्रेंसेज हम गुवाहाटी, भुवनेश्वर, भोपाल और कुछ अन्य क्षेत्रों में करें, और वहाँ के स्टेट लेवल के लोग हैं उनको भी साथ में जोड़ के इस काम को आगे बढ़ा सकते हैं। क्योंकि जब मैं भारत का मानचित्र देखता हूँ तो लगता है कि भारत का मानचित्र बहुत बड़ा है, देश विशाल है, और बहुत से विविध, कुछ वक्ताओं ने कहा भी था कि देश के अंदर में अलग अलग तरह की भाषाएं हैं, अलग तरह के लोग हैं। उन सब लोगों के अंदर में उनके साथ में कोऑर्डिनेट करते हुए कि उनका किसी तरह की हम उनको ठेस भी नहीं पहुंचाएं, उनका मान और उनका सम्मान रखते हुए हम उस काम को कैसे परिणति दे पाएं, ऐसा होगा तो बड़ा अच्छा होगा, बड़ा सुंदर होगा। भारत में हम देख रहे हैं कि हमारे यहाँ टेक्नोलॉजी का बहुत ज्यादा विकास हुआ है, और एक नक्षत्र से दूसरे नक्षत्र तक पहुंचने के अंदर में, जैसे भी DRDO के चेयरमैन साहब ने बताया कि टेक्नोलॉजी पे काम हो रहा है, काम बहुत द्रुत गति से हो रहा है। इन सबको देखते तो ऐसा लगता है कि सेवा इंटरनेशनल कार्यकर्ता भी आपको हर किलोमीटर के पॉइंट पे करने के मिल जाएंगे। हम लोग जो राजस्थान की एक भाषा में बोलते हैं ढाणी मीन्स ए सिंगल यूनिट इन ए फार्म हाउस। तो आप चलेंगे ढाणी से लेके पंचायत से होते हुए जिला, और जिला से लेके हम राज्य के हर क्षेत्र में मिलते हैं, किसी किसी तरह का सेवा का काम करते हुए। सेवा के काम के अंदर में न तो हमारे पास में कोई क्षेत्रफल का आंकलन है, न कोई उस सेवा के क्षेत्र का है कि क्या क्षेत्र में हमें काम करना है। किसी तरह की सेवा की जरूरत हो, उसमें सेवा इंटरनेशनल तत्पर है, और पूरा काम देश और विदेश, क्योंकि इसका नाम ही सेवा इंटरनेशनल है, तो सेवा करना और नेशनल और इंटरनेशनल दोनों काम। इंटरनेशनल इसलिए कि खाली भारत में नहीं, विदेशों के भी अनेक देशों में सेवा इंटरनेशनल का कार्य चल रहा है, और हमें भी बहुत सहायता मिलती है उनसे, और हम भी उनको सहायता दे रहे हैं। दोनों तरफ का काम है। अभी यूक्रेन में जैसा हुआ, तो छात्रों का लाने का काम जिस तरह से सेवा इंटरनेशनल के कार्यकर्ताओं, वॉलंटियर्स ने किया, बड़ा ही सराहनीय है। और इनकी हमारी प्रेजेंस है, हमारे वॉलंटियर्स हैं जो सब तरह का काम कर पा रहे हैं। लातूर की आपदा हो या गुजरात का भूकंप, समुद्र तटीय क्षेत्र में आने वाले चक्रवात या नेपाल का भूकंप, उत्तराखंड तासदी, ऐसे अनेक प्राकृतिक आपदाओं के साथ में सेवा इंटरनेशनल को हम जुड़ित पाते हैं। संघ के स्वयंसेवकों का पूरा सहयोग मिलता है। संघ हमारा पेरेंट है, संघ से हमें पूरा सहयोग और उनसे पूरा हमें मार्गदर्शन, और वहाँ के पालक अधिकारी समय समय पर संभालते रहते हैं, जिससे कि हमारा सेवा के काम करने में हमारा मन बढ़ता है, हमारा मनोबल बढ़ता है। देश को मंदिर समझ के और हर देशवासियों को हम ईश्वर मानते हैं। हमारे यहाँ एक स्लोगन ही है, हमारा राष्ट्रीय सेवा भारती में भी, नर सेवा नारायण सेवा। नर सेवा के अंदर में हम ज्यादा अपना ध्यान रखते हैं कि नर की सेवा हम कैसे करें, और नर के अंदर में भी खास तौर से जो पीड़ित है, उपेक्षित है, निर्बल है, किसी तरह से कुछ योग्यताओं को वो संपूर्ण नहीं कर पा रहे हैं। यहाँ किसी तरह का उस तरह का हमारा कोई भी भेदभाव नहीं है, क्योंकि जब किसी तरह की आपदा आती है तो उस आपदा के अंदर में हमारा कोई सेग्रीगेशन नहीं होता। सब तरह का कास्ट, क्रीड, जेंडर सबका वेलकम है, सबके साथ में हम मिलकर काम करते हैं। सेवा इंटरनेशनल इस तरह के कार्य पूरे देश में, खास तौर से भी कोरोना के अंदर में हमने 1 लाख से ज्यादा गांवों के अंदर में कोरोना किट का वितरण किया। उसका मुख्य उद्देश्य ये था कि कोरोना आने से ही पहले उसको प्रिवेंट कैसे कर पाए। और जो किट थी, उसके किट के जो सामान थी और जो सामान था, उस सामान का अंदर ये था कि हम उसका पहले से जांच कर लें, और कहीं भी ऐसा लगे कि कोरोना का केस है तो उसको आइसोलेशन सेंटर में पहुंचा के उसका चिकित्सा की जा सके, जिससे कि ये बीमारी महामारी और आगे नहीं बढ़े। आप सबको बताते हुए मुझे एक गर्व की अनुभूति होती है कि सेवा इंटरनेशनल के माध्यम से ग्राम आरोग्यम, ग्राम में सफाई, हरिजनों की सेवा, महिला सशक्तिकरण, वनवासियों के पुनरुत्थान, शिक्षा के क्षेत्र में, चिकित्सा, आजीविका, इन सब के क्षेत्र में बहुत बड़ा काम हो रहा है। और जिस तरह से सेवा इंटरनेशनल में नई टीम आ गई, इतने वाइब्रेंट और इतने हार्ड वर्किंग कार्यकर्ता हैं, इन सब कार्यकर्ता करने में लगता है कि जैसे काम आज हम कर रहे हैं, ये काम तो मल्टीफोल्ड हो जाएगा, बहुत तेजी से बढ़ेगा। 6 साल के अंदर में, मैं 2016 में यहाँ पहली बार ट्रस्टी बना था, उस टाइम को आज को देखता हूँ तो एक निशान जी से शुरुआत हुई, और उसके बाद में शुभम जी और अभिषेक जी, और अब तो मैं नाम लेने में भी मेरे लगता है कि एक लिस्ट बना के लानी पड़ेगी। अपनी बात को समाप्त करने से पहले मैं लता मंगेशकर के गाए हुए एक गाने की 2 पंक्तियां कहना चाहूंगा। 2 लाइन है। जीने की आज फिर से जीने की तमन्ना है, आज फिर से जीने की तमन्ना है। ये तमन्ना क्यों है? क्यों जीना सब चाहते हैं। डिसेस्टर के अंदर में किसी तरह की कोई भी विपदा आती है, उसके अंदर में हर आदमी को हम सहायता पहुंचाएं, क्योंकि उन सबको भी जीने की तमन्ना है। और उसके बाद में आज कुछ करने का इरादा है। मैंने ये पंक्ति थोड़ी बदल दी कि आज मरने की इरादा है, मरने का नहीं, हमारा कुछ करने की तमन्ना है, हम कुछ करेंगे। जहां भी लगता है कि किसी तरह का कष्ट है, उस कष्ट के अंदर में हम सम्मिलित होके उसके अंदर में रिलीफ कैसे पहुंचाएं, ये सब हमारे सेवा कार्यकर्ताओं का, सेवा वॉलंटियर्स का काम है। हम उसको कर रहे हैं, करते रहेंगे, ऐसा विश्वास नहीं, ये हमारी प्रतिज्ञा है, और ये काम चलेगा और बहुत अच्छा चलेगा। आप लोगों को, खासतौर से यंग टीम को मैं बधाई देता हूँ, और चेष्टा करूंगा कि पर्सनली बैठ के कुछ इंटरेक्शन करके आपसे समझ पाऊं कि आगे क्या क्या हो सकता है। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, साधुवाद, प्रणाम।
धन्यवाद पन्नालाल जी. I'd request some of the team members who were instrumental in getting this conference to felicitate our honorable speakers. I'd request Vani Manuraj ji and Arshleen Kohli ji. Vani Manuraj ji to Major General Ajay Seth ji. Ajay ji, your experiences will guide our journey forward. Thank you for sharing them, and thank you for being a part of the conference. I request Arshleen for Pannalal Bhansali ji. Pannalal ji, your guidance for the last many years have shaped Sewa International into what it is today. Thank you for your continued guidance. And I request Honorable Rakesh Mittal ji to share the vote of thanks for the conference.
Every good event has to come to an end at some point of time, and so is this beautiful conference. And I'm here to perform the last leg, the vote of thanks. Albert Schweitzer once said that at times our own light goes out and it is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lightened the flame within us. It was said long back, but it is so true and so relevant even now, particularly in the context of this conference. Sewa International has been supporting disaster response and long-term rehabilitation for the last 25 years. We understand the importance of reflection and collaborations. However, in the last 3 days, we have witnessed renowned identities from academics, policymaking people, industry leaders, and grassroots organizations connect to shape the future of disaster management in India. It is our honor to have been asked to offer a vote of thanks on the occasion of this conference on disaster management, and on behalf of Sewa International Bharat, I am thankful to each one of you and especially our partner, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, VES Institute of Management, ICSSR, and Oracle. I extend a very hearty gratitude to all the speakers of the thematic sessions for sharing their graceful words with us. It is my pleasure to extend my gratitude to our guest of honor, Major General Ajay Seth and Shri Abhishek Tandonji, Deputy Director Research ICSSR, our chief guest, Shri Pratap Chand Sarangi ji, Member of Parliament Lok Sabha from Odisha, our keynote speaker, Shri G. Satish Reddy ji, Chairman DRDO, for sharing their precious time with us today. I am grateful for the guidance of the chair of the session, जो हमारे अपने हैं, हमारे trustee भी हैं, Shri Pannalal ji Bhansali ji. It has been our tribute to host all the members of the audience in the conference. No event can be complete without the efforts of the organization team, and we are fortunate to witness our volunteers and team from Sewa International and VESIM strive to successfully organize this conference. My heartiest congratulations and gratitude goes to the volunteers and organizing team. I would like to thank particularly, there are few people and few organizations, key persons without whom this conference was not possible, and I would like to thank each one of them. Each one of them, especially our guests of honors who are present here today on the dais, our speakers and delegates, Lieutenant General Saeed Atta Hussain from NDMA, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi from RIS, Dr. Anil K. Gupta, Director of COEs and Project NIDM, Dr. Anjali Quatra, Shri Hari Babu Srivastav, Director General Technology Management, DRDO, Major General Ajay Seth, VSM, Dr. Indira Khurana, Vice Chairperson, Tarun Bharat Sangh, Dr. Suresh Jain, Founder, Aclean Theopatics, Shri Ranjan Divedi ji, Member National Advisory Committee, NDMM, Shri Sanjeev Kumar, Director, Indian Academy of Highways and Engineers, Shri Sarthak Mohapatra, Deputy General Manager, Odisha State Disaster Management Authority, Dr. Mahesh Kamble, Assistant Professor, Center of Disasters and Developments, TIS, Shri Milind Vaidya ji, Chairman, Center of Disaster Management and Studies. There were few organizations who have supported us wholeheartedly. I am thankful to them also on behalf of Sewa International Bharat. They are IIT Roorkee, DRDO, OSDMA, UNDP, NDMA, NIDM, and JNU. I once again thank our partners, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, Oracle, Indian Council for Social Science and Research, ICSSR, VES Institute of Management. I also welcome here, it's my privilege to welcome Surma Padi ji, who is ex-Minister of Cooperatives from the state of Odisha, and Baby Chanki ji, State President BJP Bihar. And last but not the least, I'm thankful to logistical support team at Gandhi, Smriti, Darshan, Samiti, team of Sewa International, volunteers from JNU, and all our volunteers, our energetic volunteers who had been working tirelessly for the last so many days, I would say so many weeks, and made this conference very successful. Thank you very much.
I'd request every member present here to stand up for national song. Shyamala Mataram Vande Mataram. Dhanyavad. 3 quick announcements at the end. One, whenever you're moving out, please ensure the table that you are sitting in is clean. Second, the lunch outside, just next to the hall. Please join us for a warm lunch. There is a stall outside, which is a stall created by people who were affected in 2001 Bhuj earthquake. Our sisters from Gujarat have created some beautiful products that you can use, see, and purchase if you want. And thank you all for joining us. For all the volunteers, we will meet back in the hall post lunch.